across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good evening. It's just gone 7 o'clock. This is the first evening exchange of the week. It's Monday evening. There's loads to discuss, including whether the El Salvador approach favoured by President Trump should be one that we have in this country, because Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK, says that he wants to deport all foreign criminals, and if their own countries won't take them back, well, they could be off to El Salvador. He's going on a mission there. We'll speak to someone who's going with him a little bit later on in the programme. We'll also talk about the Prime Minister off around the UK on a tour. His first as Prime Minister, really going to all arts and parts. We'll find out what he's up to and why. Also, a brewing crisis when it comes to the military and pensions. There are all sorts of problems, including people who've loyally served this country in uniform being asked for money back. And I'm not just talking a few hundred quid, I'm talking tens of thousands of pounds because of administrative errors. We will speak to someone affected, and if you are someone who has gone through this, I'd love to hear from you too. I know that loads of military families and veterans listen to this show. Whatever you'd like to say, however you'd like to say it, please do give me a shout. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note, less than a minute, please. Send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring, all on the main number, 0344 499 1000. And plenty on that small boat that absolutely is not a small boat too, with nearly 300 migrants on it. Why can't we cope? So much to discuss between now and 10. Stay with us here on the Evening Exchange on Talk. John's been in touch already from Devon and says, I think the reason both the wet Tories and Marxist Labour won't stop the illegal immigrants is a sop to our colonial guilt. Probably explains why certain countries continue to receive foreign aid. That's John in Devon there, and thank you for your message. He texted that in on 87222. Speaking of foreigners, Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK, big press conference this morning. He says that he will solve the prisons crisis. They're full to bursting at the moment, and the problems are just exacerbated by the fact that a load of people they've let out have reoffended, so they go back in. They're released on licence, they reoffend, they go back in. That's what happens. So the crisis isn't getting much better. Nigel Farage says the way to deal with it is to get rid of the foreign offenders, and as soon as they are sentenced to prison, send them back to their home country. If their home country doesn't take them, send them to El Salvador. This is what the leader of Reform UK said this morning.
This is really quite straightforward. We send people back to their country of origin, so it needs a phone call with Edi Rama from Albania, etc. And if they refuse, we then send foreign national offenders off to third parties. Kosovo is perhaps one good example currently being used by Sweden, and we are organising a trip to El Salvador. And by the way, not all of the prisons, the cages that you've seen on television, and Lee Addison and Vanessa Frake, the former prison governor, they will both be visiting El Salvador soon. To house a foreign national offender in El Salvador will be half the cost of housing a foreign national offender in this country, and will give us more prison spaces.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister is doing a tour of the UK. He's talked about his priorities for that.
The public's priority is reducing cost of living pressures, and that's what I'm doing. I'm taking a difficult look at some of the things that the government was committed to, digital ID being one example, and reprioritising. And I think that's what people would expect me to do coming into this job.
Lots to discuss in all of this. Loads for Isabel Oakeshott to sink her teeth into. She's the international editor of Talk and joins me now. Isabel, lovely to see you. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you, Peter.
Delighted to hear it. What do you think?
I'm trying to think, lots to be cheerful about, is there? I don't know, maybe not.
Oh, well, indeed. Nigel Farage off to El Salvador. What do you think of this scheme?
Well, I think in theory, I really like the idea of it. I think what I'm guessing what Reform is trying to do here is show that they can be a bit more creative about how to solve some of the biggest, most pressing problems facing our country. So instead of just saying, as this Labour administration seems to be doing, just like Keir Starmer's administration, instead of saying, well, we don't have enough prison spaces, so we're just going to let people out. Reform is saying, well, how about we do some deals with countries that have spare capacity? Now, I guess that's a kind of version of what Rishi Sunak was thinking with the Rwanda scheme, only hopefully an awful lot less complicated. It sounds to me as if it's at a very early stage of development in terms of Reform's thinking on this. They're talking about doing a bit of a recce to El Salvador later in the autumn, and doubtless wanting to reach out to a number of other countries. And I'm not sure how many of those conversations have begun and how detailed they are. But it seems like a good idea. And at the same time, perhaps, how about just building some more prisons?
Well, interestingly, you mentioned that. I mean, Labour has said this isn't a serious prison plan. It would take years to arrange, as does nothing to tackle the pressures we face now. Of course, Reform UK isn't the government now, so it's not their job to deal with the pressures we face now. But Zia Youssef and Nigel Farage have said all 10,000 foreign nationals in UK jails to be sent back either to their home countries or to a prison in a third country, such as El Salvador. The MOD sites in this Nightingale prison, do you think that's workable? Because no specific sites have been named. They said only lower level offenders would be kept in those prisons. Certainly, I know that Mike Neville, the former Detective Chief Inspector, has said that they are workable. Others say they aren't. What's your view on this, Isabel, on Nightingale prisons?
My view on it is that we've actually got quite a few sort of semi-abandoned prisons, which I think would be quite possible to revive. I mean, there's one that I've done a bit of research on in the past in Dartmoor. Very, very famous prison, actually, appears in a lot of literature. It's an old prison. Well, it was abandoned, not because it was sort of falling apart at the seams, but because of some, in my view, probably rather hyped up worries about radon, this kind of gas that appears to be somewhere deep in the peat in those parts of the moors, that plenty of people in the neighbourhood seem to live quite happily with. So, you know, we do have facilities that have been abandoned, perhaps prematurely, could well be fixable. I think there are a number of them across the country. That might be an awful lot quicker than trying to build new infrastructure from scratch.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. We'll be speaking to someone a little bit later on in the programme who is going to El Salvador with Nigel Farage. Tell us about the early release roller coaster and the fact that rape and sexual assault victims distress at the early release scheme. This seems to be a total mess. I remember saying, I'm not saying I told you so, but this time, around this time last week, when it came to PC Andrew Harper's killers, I just thought you can't apply the law selectively. You're going to get judicial review. You're going to get legal problems with that. I signed the petition. I want them to be put back in prison. I'd like a lot of other people to be put back in prison as well. But you can't. It's very difficult to change the law retrospectively. You're going to get JR'd for that as well. ECHR is going to be involved. There are going to be all sorts of ways that you can't do this. But there are a lot of people who just don't know what's going on, especially people who've suffered severe trauma when it comes to being victims of crime. And here we are, Andy Burnham saying, we'll look into this. Well, we're not really sure what we're going to do. Front page of the Times today saying, well, a lot of lawyers say you can't do it.
Yeah, I mean, this is all a complete and utter mess, isn't it? And I think the whole concept of, you know, letting out a bunch of people early is so misconceived when you look at the reoffending rates anyway. I mean, I was quite shocked. I looked at the statistics this morning. For shorter sentences, the reoffending rate is in the 60% and upwards, which is extraordinary when you think about it. I mean, it just completely suggests that prison doesn't work. I'm not saying that that means we shouldn't send people to prison. I think I'm probably saying that means we should send them for a little bit longer and make it a little bit harsher, so it does actually have an impact and perhaps provide people with the extra skills and life skills, if you like, that they're going to need when they get out. I mean, this is a really interesting and complex area. It's not as simple as just saying make prison much more horrible, although of course that does work El Salvador style, where people are incarcerated with no hope of ever getting out. I'm a little bit sort of softer on that sort of side of things. I don't really see the point of, making it impossible to have any hope whatsoever, except in the most extreme cases of horrendous murder and other really very extreme crimes. I'm in favour of making prison something that is actually correctional, that does actually have an impact on a character. And what we've got at the moment is, on average, not that. With shorter sentences, people just go back to the same old cycle, because it's a bit like being an addict. When you're addicted to drugs or alcohol, you can go to rehab, and you can pay a lot of money to send somebody to rehab. And when they come out, and they can do very well in rehab, but the minute they come out, they're back in exactly the same setting as they were when they were an addict. And they just quickly snap back to those old behaviors. So, prison doesn't solve things that easily when people just go back to the same old communities, the same problems that they had before they went in.
I think you're absolutely right, Isabel. It has to be correctional in some way, and unless you're Wayne Couzens or Rose West or one of the 80 or so people who have whole life tariffs, you're going to get out. And I want those people to have a job. I want them to pay taxes. I want them to have a roof over their head. I want them to be functional members of society, because it's far more expensive to send them back to prison than it is, or even to have them in prison, than it is for them to be, members of society who contribute in some way. Lots to discuss as well on Burnham beginning the UK cost of living tour. What do you make of this?
I'm just a bit bored by it. I kind of I don't, which doesn't mean we shouldn't be talking about it, but I kind of don't care about his tour. I don't think we need a listening exercise to list and identify. Yeah,
we know what the issue is. We know what the problem is. We don't need him to go places and see people and be visible.
It's a bunch of photo opportunities, so he can say, I've visited the four corners of this county and that county, and I've done this and I've done that. I just think it's a performance, and I don't think we've got time for that. I think the situation that we're in is really, really serious and urgent. We've had 230 people coming over in the last 24 hours on a single boat. What? That is number one at this point. You shouldn't be wasting time, trotting around different parts of the UK, listening to what we already know.
And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. Just on the Burnham bounce, he does seem to be doing a bit better in some of the polls. Reform in third place in some of those polls as well. I just wonder what you make of that.
Well, I'm not particularly surprised. I just think there's going to be a cold, hard reckoning for Labour in the autumn. I think there's no point in pretending that this hasn't been a difficult period for reform. It definitely has. But for all, it's getting kind of interesting now, isn't it? Because you've got all these the three biggest parties, Reform, Labour and the Tories, all within a few points of each other in the low or mid-20s. I think that with the Conservatives, it's still the case that Kemi Badenoch has done a lot better after a poor start. She has been doing a lot better, but her party is still completely distrusted. That is borne out in the qualitative focus group polling and so on. And as for Nigel Farage, well, he's got the Clacton results coming up later this week, and he will hope that somehow draws a line, at least, for a bit, gives him some breathing space after all these difficulties that the party has had in recent weeks. So I think a lot will change in the coming months in these polls, which is not to say that they're not pretty interesting as they are.
Isabel, as always, thank you. Isabel Oakeshott, Talk's international editor. Thanks to Zarina, who says, as the dinghies are increasing in size, I would expect the danger of the crossing will increase too. My point, however, is one of concern about human rights. Allowing people to clamber aboard these boats, are the French police not in violation of maritime safety laws or human rights laws? The police are knowingly allowing these people to take off in an obviously unsafe vessel that must be in breach of some law or two. Where are the lawyers and the knives to cut the boats, says Zarina. Well, thank you for that. Dave says, good evening, Peter. Good evening, Dave. Labour have one in, one out with France. So are we sending 230 people back later this evening? We also appear to have a one in, one out policy with prisoners. We have plenty of prisons that are closed. Gloucester, where I am, just reopen these. It's got to be better than the current situation. Very interesting points there, Dave. And D says the present government are on a mission to kill the part-time work availability stone dead, so they ramped up the cost to employers. They evidently want to run down the armed forces, so they punish them for doing their jobs in active service, take away their pensions after they've risked their lives. They appear to want to crash the prison system, so they import putative foreign offenders and put them in hotels until they have decided how they want to break the law. We will be talking about that pensions issue a little bit later on. We know the Clacton by-election is on Thursday. Isabel mentioned it there, so we'll have the read of the candidates now. Then we'll go to a quick break. We'll be back in the debate desk. Sean Hickey and Joe Wheeler, our usual Monday night debate desk regulars, will be with us. They'll be discussing all of these things. I'd love to hear your views too. Do give me a shout. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
To the full list of candidates for the Clacton by-election: Joseph 77, the Independent; Adam Akatip, the Forward Party; Count Binface, the Count Binface Party; Nick the Incredible Flying Brick, the Official Monster Raving Loony Party; Tony Kane's an Independent; Woke Trump Kazi is an Independent; William Stewart James Clouston is the Social Democratic Party candidate; Rhys Cowan, an Independent; Glenn Charles Cummings, an Independent; Martin Davis, the Freedom Alliance Real People Real Alternative; Andy Earlam's an Independent; Nigel Farage, the Reform UK Party; Atiye Fards, an Independent; Lawrence Fox for the Reclaim Party; Tony Francis is an Independent; Robin Green, an Independent; Abby Hookway, an Independent; Howling Lord Hope, the Official Monster Raving Loony Party; Stephen Richard Ingram is an Independent, as is Amy Morris; Derek Norbert Morris is an Independent; Michael Noel O'Keefe, an Independent; Martin O'Brien, an Independent; Nick Pellis, an Independent; and Ketanar Kumar Pipiaya is the UK Voice Safer and Stronger UK Party; Daniel Pocock's an Independent; James Ransley, the Consensus Party candidate; Jerry Smith is an Independent; Kai Stevens for the British Democrats; John Stevens for rejoin the EU; Baron von Thunderclap for the Official Monster Raving Loony Party; Pamela Walford is an Independent; Marcus White, Everyone is God Party; and Mark Wilkinson for the Independents.
My father was born here, my mother was born here, I was born here, I consider myself British. People with exactly the same credentials, but maybe their family came from the Caribbean or came from India, but they have lived here 2 or 3 generations. They shared language, values, beliefs, integrated, assimilated generations ago. Why is they having babies? Why is that a threat to this country?
So, Julia, you are here acting as a mouthpiece for the regime that currently governs this country.
Do shut up, Charlie. You're embarrassing yourself.
What you're saying is exactly the same thing I've been hearing for my...
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
At the press conference this morning, Nigel Farage talked about Anne Widdecombe's case and a firebombing of his home, which has been looked at by police also looking at Anne Widdecombe's case. This is what the Reform UK leader said.
Of course, most of the media organisations in this room called me a liar. Remember that vividly. Half of you in the room called me a liar. But the truth is, there was an investigation into this, and clearly, counter-terrorism made some mistakes, which is why they've referred themselves to the Independent Office of Police Complaints. I understand this is a completely unprecedented move. And yes, this is directly linked to the murder of Anne Widdecombe. And I'm afraid I just can't tell you any more than that at this stage.
That was one of the aspects that Nigel Farage talked about. The main aspect, though, which we're going to talk about in just a second on the debate desk, is about prisons and prison reform and this idea that foreign national offenders should be sent back to their country of origin immediately, and if their country of origin doesn't take them, that they could, in theory, be sent to El Salvador in South America. Let's see what Nigel Farage said about that.
This is really quite straightforward. We send people back to their country of origin, so it needs a phone call with Eddie Rama from Albania, etc. And if they refuse, we then send foreign national offenders off to third parties. Kosovo is perhaps one good example currently being used by Sweden, and we are organising a trip to El Salvador. And by the way, not all of the prisons, the cages that you've seen on television, and Lee Addison and Vanessa Frake, the former prison governor, they will both be visiting El Salvador soon. To house a foreign national offender in El Salvador will be half the cost of housing a foreign national offender in this country and will give us more prison spaces.
Nigel Farage there speaking earlier, and apologies, of course, El Salvador is in Central America. I gave up geography aged 14 and it has shown. Let's go to the debate desk. The meteorologist and broadcaster Joe Wheeler is with us. Hi Joe, how are you doing?
Hello, yeah, not bad at all.
And Sean Hickey, he's the head of content at Politics. Joe is with us. Hello sir.
Good to see you here.
Joe brought in some beautiful fruit from your garden today for us, which was exciting. Did you get any of it?
I did. What was the name of it?
It was a green gauge.
A green gauge.
I had a green gauge. Did you have a green gauge?
I've never had one.
I've never had a green
today.
gauge either. No, yeah. All these delicious kind of plums and peaches and all sorts of things. Have you ever been to El Salvador? You've travelled extensively.
I haven't been to El Salvador. Do you know something? We're going to start sending all our foreign prisoners there. I'm never going to go. Isn't there a problem here? Since Farage also said that when these prisoners are released, we won't have them back in Britain.
Yes.
But actually, you are then feeding a lot of bad people into one place where they serve time and then stay local. And at that point, you end up with a population that proportionally has an awful lot of offenders in it.
But I mean, Nigel Farage would presumably say if El Salvador takes them and they're happy to take the money to house those prisoners, well, when they're released, that's their problem.
Well, it may well be their problem, but I would guess the only reason they're going to accept them in the first place is because there's money involved and they need that money. But then when they're released, they've got to deal with that issue thereafter, which doesn't seem to work, you know, in terms of an equal population.
What do you think, Sean, of this plan? Because it's been criticised by Labour, says it would take years to arrange as there's nothing to tackle the pressures we face now. But of course, Reform UK aren't in government now, and they're unlikely to be for at least another 3 years. We'll talk about the polls in a second or two. They're not doing so well there. But as a general concept, does it have your support?
I mean, it just seems like it's a wash and dry version of Suella Braverman's failed Rwanda plan, just with prisoners rather than with refugees. I mean, you're looking at a party that's recycled all of its all of the Conservative Party that failed in any policy that had to do with deporting people to X, Y and Z country. The idea that somewhere like, before we even talk about the human rights abuses that may be going on in prisons in El Salvador, you look at a place like Kosovo that was the other proposed nation. And there's already concerns about how they house prisoners in Kosovo as well. El Salvador, Donald Trump has been sending prisoners and people suspected of crimes to El Salvador for the last year or so. And there's been many instances where people just go entirely missing between being deported from the United States and being sent to El Salvador. A lot of people that have lived in the United States for decades, maybe their entire lives, will have no reason to come back to the United States just because they've been deported there in the first place. I mean, you're talking about whether or not these people are going to get out of prison and then reintegrate into El Salvadorian life. The way that the prisons operate is essentially run by gangs. They've had a massive problem with
That's often the case in this country, and I think a lot of our viewers and listeners, if these people have committed and have been convicted of taking part in heinous crimes, I just don't think the sympathy will probably be quite limited.
I mean, I'd agree with you there, but I think earlier on in the press conference, Zia Yusuf said, and maybe we're going to talk about the Nightingale as the other side of this in a second, but he said that it wouldn't be shoplifters or petty criminals that are going to El Salvador. It would just be them going to the Nightingale, I beg your pardon, not hospitals, prisons.
Prisons, yes.
So there's a big gap between gang members and shoplifters that there's a question of, is a guy from Germany going to be sent to El Salvador because he
Well, if Germany takes him back, he'll be fine. I mean, what do you think?
Well, this whole thing is ridiculous. Yeah, we've been speaking about the Nightingale prisons, which might be old MOD bases.
Yes.
Well, we've already had the issue with Scampton, you know, where they were trying to put migrants and a massive, you know, outcry. OK, if you accept that your nearest you know, MOD has been turned into a prison, but only for shoplifters. Well, I'm sorry, we're talking about early release. Yeah, we're not talking about shoplifters, are we?
The point, though, as well, is it's different. When you have a migrant site, it's not secure, and those people can be in the community, whereas if it's a prison can actually be, I mean, nobody wants a prison in their community, but that's part of the reason why loads of them haven't been built. But the fact is, it can be a real economic boon to a community. You have a secure population within that, very different from an asylum centre, and it creates lots of employment, lots of supply chain demand, for example, for food, for all sorts of equipment and so on. So it could actually be, for a lot of areas that are looking for an economic boost, that could be a nice economic boost for them, actually.
No, I understand that. As I say, you know, looking at Scampton, where they were proposing to put migrants, and there was a massive outcry from the locals, correctly so. If you turn that into an institution for low-grade offenders, it would be like North Sea Camp, which is not too far away from me in Lincolnshire, you know, which, as you say, you know, they go out and they work, they're part of the community, and they rehabilitate. That's the whole point of these prisons. You know, if it were that, that's fine. But, you know, we're not talking about these people. And the stupid thing is that all these political parties are simply going up against each other and going, you can't do that, you can't do that, until we leave the ECHER. You can't do that either.
I mean,
sorry, go ahead.
You're talking as well about like whether this is going to be a economic boost for an area, but most of the prisons that are currently operating are run by Serco and G4S. It's not necessarily a mom and pop shop that's going to be getting an economic boost.
But local, I mean, it's employment for the local population. Yeah. The food comes in usually from local populations
suppliers. That Nigel Farage is talking about is your average age of 60, 65-year-olds that had probably worked. I think he gave an anecdote of somebody who used to be working in the military that was lamenting the death of his local MOD centre. He's not going to be reskilling to be a prison officer.
No, but his kids might. It's also this point about the residents of a tiny English village being furious over plans to house hundreds of people seeking asylum. Piddington, of course, we're talking about a nearby disused military barracks. We've been talking a little bit about that story as well, and Rob Scott says, yeah, you're right, Joe released them in Piddington. Unbelievable. I think I was correct, lefty corner, apart from Joe, Rob said earlier, and then changed his mind 2 minutes later, but that's what he's called the debate desk. I'm not sure Joe is in lefty corner. I think Sean's probably fairly happy enough in lefty corner. And
Simon, the water's lovely, Joe.
Simon is tepid. Simon says, I think before this government ever does anything about these migrants, I'm willing to place a wager on them sending out bigger rescue boats to cater for the increased number of passengers that are now filling these super-duper dinghies, costing the taxpayer even more. That's Simon in Manning Tree. And we will, of course, talk a bit more about that as time goes on. Actually, lefty corner would presumably be cold water, like cold water swimming, because as soon as you know what happens, you go cold water swimming the first time, and then the Guardian just gets directly in touch to get you to write an article for them. That's what happens. Never been cold water swimming, and I never will. Stay with us here on Talk, and if you have views that you want to get across, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Penny's been in touch and says, hi Peter, the El Salvador prison is the prison putting the fear of God in these criminals. All the bleeding hearts say, oh, this is a dreadful place, you can't put people in there. But it works. Crime is halved in El Salvador now. Sorry, but those killers of Andrew Harper and the killer who tortured baby Preston to death and his paedophile partner can be tortured in there all day for all I care. They're evil personified. Pete says, good evening Peter, great show. Thank you Pete. I'm really confused about Burnham's missions on this tour. If it's about getting to the truth, get into towns and answer questions from the electorate, not do-gooders. Let's listen to the true feelings of the British working class. No backbenchers will stop anything we want. You can ruin this country for the next 3 years and we'll go down in history as a country wrecker in Pete's view. Dawn says, I do wonder if it is just beyond our politicians to stop the migrant boats. What a desperate thought. And this is because of what has happened. The huge dinghy, it's not a small boat at all, 230 people crossing the channel in one small boat. Joe, what do you make of this? It's a very, very worrying development, and it just shows that what happens, I've seen it loads of times. It started on trains, that was stopped, then it was in lorries, then they innovated to boats. This innovation is just a larger boat. It's continuing, isn't it?
It absolutely is, and we're hearing these figures that, in fact, there are fewer people who've crossed the channel this year and there have been fewer crossings. And involved as I am with the weather, I'm thinking, well, I don't really understand why that is, because there's been barely a ripple since, the end of May. Yep. And they're bringing in these bigger boats. Now, do you know something? There's a huge amount of this that I do not believe. This time we've got photographs of infants and, women on these boats, whereas historically and statistically, they have been full of young fighting-age men. And so you think, why suddenly are we seeing women and children, on these boats? Also, there's this issue of the fact they've got to cross the channel, remembering, of course, that people do swim the channel. In fact, they only have to get halfway over. Then they're picked up and escorted back. So remind me a bit of this which isn't safe. There's also that there's a sports store in northern France where they are selling an awful lot of life jackets, let's put it that way. We are paying the French 662 million quid. Yeah, I'm sorry, I do not think that's money well spent. If I were budgeting, that would be the first figure I'd look at.
Sean, what do you make of this?
Well, I think there's a couple of things there that, for one, yes, people do swim the channel, but you or I couldn't go out there right now and swim the channel. It is quite a feat. So I think you do need a boat.
Cold water.
Oh, well, yeah, that's it. But I'm not sure. I think what you're seeing here is more an instance of the dinghies that they've been using previously seem to have been unsuccessful recently from whatever Labour have been doing with the French government, to the point where now there's either overcrowding on boats or they're innovating to have a bigger boat.
And Labour say, and the Home Office say, you're absolutely right, Sean, Labour will say that crossings are down 44%. So presumably a bigger boat and a single boat is much more likely to get across unhindered.
Well, this is it.
So they're just innovating. They're just doing what I said. They're just innovating.
Yeah,
they're just finding ways to make this work.
And I mean, if you put more people into more big boats, eventually you're going to have stories like 230 people crossing in one day in one boat. I do think, however, despite the fact that the numbers have come down, it's an incredibly dangerous thing for the French government to be allowing go from their shores into British waters.
What's the solution here, Sean?
Well, what's the question in the first place? The question has been that the British government and the French government seem to have some strange misunderstanding every single time that they meet each other, where British government, whether it's a Conservative government under Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson, whoever it might be, or Keir Starmer or Andy Burnham, go over to Paris, have a chat with Emmanuel Macron, they come back here and say, he said that he's going to fix it. 2 months later, nothing happened.
And we see these stories where the gendarmes are literally standing in the water, you know, up to wherever their boots will let them, you know, watching these people get onto the boats. In 2018, there was an average of 7 people per boat, and last year that had risen to 62, and now we've just seen 230 people coming across. I mean, they might as well get a ferry.
Yeah.
Just to say, there's a bit of breaking news from Colombia. Colombia has declared a national emergency following a deadly earthquake. Dozens of people are dead after a powerful earthquake has hit the west of the country. The magnitude 7.4 quake struck a little earlier today at the Choco region at a depth of 66 miles, according to the US Geological Survey. Shaking was felt across the country, as well as in neighbouring Venezuela, Ecuador and Panama. Buildings have collapsed. Rescue efforts are underway to free those who've been trapped beneath the rubble. It comes less than 2 months after twin quakes devastated parts of Venezuela, killing more than 6,100 people. The death toll at the moment is 111, and there are 87 people injured. I'm sure that will rise as time goes on. Another piece of breaking news, which is sadly more relevant to us here in the UK, is that almost 3/4 of England is in flash drought as a dry start to August has followed the country's driest July on record. That's according to the Environment Agency. And more than 120 firefighters are continuing to tackle a devastating blaze on internationally protected heathland in the New Forest National Park, which is apparently rarer than rainforests. Joe, of course, is a meteorologist. Tell us what's going on at the moment and what's likely to happen in the next few days.
Well, certainly over the past week or so, many more places have been classified as being in drought as opposed to just prolonged wet weather. It's the 7th consecutive week that we've seen less than 10 millimetres of rainfall, particularly for eastern and southeastern parts of the country. I should say, in contrast, parts of Scotland have seen somewhere between 50 and 100 millimetres. That's like half a month's rainfall, you know, literally over a weekend. So we've got this disparity in water reception across the country. Our reservoirs are currently at around 69%, dropping 3% in the last week. But those levels are still higher than both 2025 and 2022. Of the reservoirs we do have, 5 are currently exceptionally low. Now, obviously, when we get these low water levels, there are quite a few places that have these tub orders, temporary use bans, so you can't use your hose pipes and that kind of thing. Anglian Water, for some reason, have used the whole region, say their whole region has got a hose pipe ban, except for Hartlepool. I don't quite know why Hartlepool has been exempt. But there you go. Yes, the prolonged dry weather is causing issues. I think quite a few people have seen scorched lawns, scorched grass, or, you know, pretty much wherever you go. In the East Midlands, where I live, virtually no water at all. And, of course, then you get the wildfires. It doesn't really take very much. A discarded cigarette, a barbecue, you know, somebody having a campfire, even a spark from a car, you know, can set it off, and some of these become very difficult to control, particularly where you get peatland, because something will start to burn and it'll smoulder for up to 2 weeks before it actually starts to ignite. So the prolonged dry weather is causing an issue, and I think it's right to flag it up. I mean, earlier in the year we did have an awful lot of wet weather, and in the same way that we have a flood, you know, they go, oh, this is, you know, because of so much rain, and the answer is no, it's the infrastructure. Are we so dry now because our reservoirs aren't competent and our watercourses?
Yeah. So what's going to happen weather-wise over the next few days?
Well, things do become a little more unsettled, but, you know, the crystal ball gazing in which we look, you know, a couple of weeks ahead, looks like high pressure never really goes away.
So are we looking at another heat wave?
We've got another heat wave coming this week.
Okay.
That's only 3 days, 3 consecutive days where temperatures reach a threshold. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Down in the southeast Friday as well.
Okay.
Then there's potential for things to become a little more unsettled. But then high pressure builds back in. This week it's going to be kind of over us and drifting eastwards, which is drawing in warmth from the near continent. Our current heat actually comes from Iceland, but anyway. And then we build high pressure in the west once again, and so that'll bring more of a north-northwesterly flow, so a cooler period of settled weather. If we could lose some of the heat, that would help as well.
Yeah. Joe Wheeler, the Swiss Army knife of debate desk guess. A couple more messages and then we'll go to a break. Zarina says, I love your show. I'm surprised that the government aren't sending the Navy or the RNLI directly to France to pick up the migrants. There would be very little difference. Martin in Lichfield says, why is your male guest worried about the human rights of rapists and murderers? What about the human rights of the victims? Serious criminals should have no human rights until released. They should be punished, and the deterrent is nobody wants to go to prison. That's the point. It's not a holiday camp, says Martin. Do you want to respond to that, Sean?
I mean, you still have duties to people whether they're in prison or not. If they waive their human rights when they go to prison, nobody comes out of prison at any point ever.
Okay. Grant says, my parents' home is in Piddington, just a mile away. It's a Bullingdon high security prison. I've never heard of escaped prisoners. There may have a few, but in 40-odd years there's no local fear, unlike housing 2,000 men who are free to roam. Sadly, my parents are not here, and we are trying to sell the house. I dread to think of the sudden drop in house prices. Also, there's nothing for the men to do. Tanya says, your commentators are saying there's no solution. Do they have one? They're missing the point. Reforms policy is a deterrent, which we don't have. Don't want to go to prison in El Salvador? Don't commit crime in the UK. Don't want to be released into El Salvador after? Don't commit crime in the UK. And Deborah says, I really don't give two hoots about Burnham doing his tour. It will all be staged. He won't be speaking to real people who are struggling with everyday living costs. We need a new government, plain and simple. Nigel has shown today, where there's a will, there's a way. Keep up the good work, says Deborah. Lots more to discuss. We'll talk about the asylum seeker who raped a 13-year-old schoolgirl. We'll talk about 40% of people saying migration has been mostly bad for Britain. Quite a big shift as well in Remain voters. They're less happy than you might think. We'll talk about Professor Jason Arday as well, cancelling the book event. It's a shame, actually, because I quite like fiction. Stay with us here on Talk.
My father was born here, my mother was born here, I was born here, I consider myself British. People with exactly the same credentials, but maybe their family came from the Caribbean or came from India, but they have lived here 2 or 3 generations. They shared language, values, beliefs, integrated, assimilated generations ago. Why is they having babies? Why is that a threat to this country?
So, Julia, you are here acting as a mouthpiece for the regime that currently governs this country.
Oh, do shut up, Charlie. You're embarrassing yourself.
What you're saying is exactly the same thing I've been hearing for my...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Phil has been in touch from Essex and says, instead of break the gangs, why don't we break the companies that are making these boats, putting them out of business? Testy on Tyneside says, how long before worthy UK lefty celebs invade the beaches of France and lay on concerts for the invaders while they wait for their frigate-sized boats? Might as well make it even more like a holiday for them. Calais can do the catering while handing out how to get asylum pamphlets, he says. And Ernie says there's nothing stopping the people smugglers from hiring a cruise ship from some third world country, filling it up and sending it over to us. If the people on board say they want asylum, we've got to accommodate them. It really is pathetic, and something really needs to be done about it through the courts. We can't just let this government let it happen. It is so wrong. Well, speaking of asylum seekers, one of them, who's 28, raped a 13-year-old schoolgirl after posing as a boy on Snapchat. He's been jailed for 9 years. An absolutely disgusting and horrific crime. What do you make of this, Joe?
And it's shocking and it's horrific. And I know much is spoken at the moment about keeping children safe on social media. It's very difficult. There are so many different ones. Snapchat is not one that I'm overly familiar with, but I believe it's one where the chat is there and then it vanishes.
That's right.
Which makes it very difficult for any parent to, you know, basically police what their child is doing. But I mean, this is absolutely horrendous. If we can't police the social media overall, then we should be able to
Although
police...
in this case it has been policed and he's been sent to prison for 9 years, but he is someone who...
He was caught out on Snapchat.
Yeah, well, indeed, and he is someone, this person is someone who Nigel Farage would send back to whence he came, or indeed to El Salvador.
And rightfully so. You know, rightfully so. I don't see why we should have to pay for him. But, you know, and I'm glad that actually... her abuser has been found, but it doesn't put things right.
Yes.
As she said, you know, this is going to affect her for the rest of her life. She's unable to trust people, suffers flashback and has suffered self-harm.
Very interesting. We're talking about asylum seekers, boats and all the rest of it. Very interesting polling here from YouGov, the polling company, that suggests over 40% of people say migration has been mostly bad for Britain. The shift has been particularly pronounced among Remain voters, according to this survey. Now, it's nearly doubled. So the people who voted Remain in 2016, who said migration has been bad for the country, has risen from 12% to 22%. It's still only a fifth, but it is interesting nonetheless. And I wonder what you make of that, Sean.
Yeah, I suppose I'm going to have to get my coat now, aren't I? Because I'm a migrant to this country. If the Remain voters don't want me here, then I don't know who will.
Although the common travel area means that,
well, yeah,
you know,
of course.
you know, the Irish are a little bit different when it comes to the law anyway. So, yeah, you can vote in our elections and so on if you want to.
Except for a referendum.
Oh,
so
really?
I wouldn't have been one of the Remain voters at that time. I wouldn't have been allowed.
Good. Excellent. Glad to hear it.
It is an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, the attitudes to immigration, I'd wonder how many people that are answering these questions were thinking of immigration as immigration from the European Union, immigration from the United States, or people on small boats. Because the people on small boats, by the way, are a fraction.
It's a small number.
A fraction of the immigration that's coming into this country. So it's...
a small number, but a huge cost. And, of course, it's a very live political issue. That's an interesting point, actually, Joe. When you hear the word immigration, what do you immediately think? Do you think of doctors coming from India, or do you think of people coming across on small boats?
I think now we think of people coming across on small boats.
Yeah.
I think we've gone from a situation where we considered the idea of immigration, as you say, people come to this country either for economic reasons, as many did, and one of the interesting statistics was the fact that, let me find it, there's been a stark drop in the number of Britons wanting to see fewer Poles coming to the UK, from 42% to 26%. So people seem to
be... being against Poles.
Yeah, should we get our spelling bee out? Yeah, but you know that is a fairly dramatic turnaround, and I understand that. You know, at some point when we were talking about immigration, it's like, oh, the people come here and you know take our jobs or do the jobs that we don't necessarily want to do, but we don't like the fact there are so many of them. Has changed dramatically as we're looking at this immigration. All right, it might be a fraction of the number, but people coming across in small boats, and so you know this poll also said more than a fifth said that UK should take no migrants from Nigeria, and a quarter would have a complete ban on Pakistani citizens settling in the UK. Similar number, 24%, would stop migration from Israel, 34% would stop migration from Russia. So there are a lot of factors at play here.
Yes, it's not just,
you know, nations...
And people do have a concept, don't they, of what is good immigration and what is bad immigration. It's interesting, Poland is a very interesting example as well, because there are quite a few Poles who are going back to Poland because their economy is booming. It's doing much better now.
Yeah. But I mean, it's also...
And they have very low immigration.
Yeah, that as well.
But I think it's testament to how just the general public's impression of immigration changes over time. Like, I remember being... God, I don't know if I was even a teenager at the time when there was the expansion of the European Union to allow Lithuanians and Polish people to move to countries like Ireland. Yep. At one point, I think still currently.
And Ireland changed dramatically as a result.
Massively. The second most common language in Ireland at the moment is Polish.
And you can't speak either of them.
Barely English.
More people speak Polish than speak Irish.
That's right, yeah. And you remember famously Arlene Foster, about 10 years ago, was making the argument in the north of Ireland that you should have Polish street signs instead of Irish street signs.
I think it's a very compelling argument. I mean, I think, let's have them in Mandarin as well.
Yeah. Let's see how big they are at the end of it. But, I mean, it is interesting, and you'd wonder, I mean, you're not just talking about Polish, Eastern European migration in the early 2000s. There are times we all know of where there were signs in shops and in restaurants saying no blacks, no dogs, no Irish for people in the 1960s. So there's always a changing impression of migration, and it'd be interesting to see if that 40% number would reduce over time.
Okay. On Jason Arday's book as well, I want to talk about this in a second. Alex in Cardiff says, he's mentioned it, not me. Please take note, Ofcom. He says, I'm afraid, Peter, Jason Arday's book is going to outsell political animals by a mile. He's going to make a fortune for being a liar that's caught interest the world over, which is just as wrong as your books are true to life. Do you still think that Andy Burnham's publicity stunts are good because it might get more people interested in politics? Maybe that's a thought, Alex. It's certainly going to fester. As far as I know, there are no actual knowing lies in my book. I'm sure there are mistakes, but I haven't been able to spot any recently. Anyway, the point is, I mean, this story just continues, doesn't it? It's the Jason Arday story. There are all sorts of inquiries now. There are all sorts of people on the left saying that he's being targeted because he's black. I mean, it's not because he's black. It's because he's a liar. I'm sorry. It's nothing to do with the melanin in the skin. It's to do with he doesn't tell the truth.
I haven't actually sat down and caught up with all the details of this, but I keep catching bits of it as I go past the television during the day, and I'm thinking, what are you actually saying? But I think one of the pieces that really struck home was by Alison Pearson, who was describing how hard she worked to get into, what is known as one of the top universities in the country. Literally reading every book, memorising, working a little heart out. And then to find that somebody like this is not only there, but is a professor. I have to say, it gave great food for thought for the cartoonists in the newspapers. There were some brilliant cartoons.
There were some very good cartoons,
But, I mean, how do they live this? How do they live this down? How does Cambridge live this down? I don't see that they ever can.
It's not just about him. It's about the other people who believed and in some cases wanted to believe his story. I mean, it's very interesting. We played a clip actually on Friday of one of his classmates who said, he wasn't someone who was mute at all. He was, as he put it, a chatty patty who didn't stop talking. What do you make of this story?
It's a bizarre kind of mishmash of a man that's a great storyteller and a man that will latch on to anything that people believe him on. I mean, the very fact that Cambridge had taken this person in to be a professor in the university is baffling in itself. Then you spend the whole weekend getting this article, that article, the other article saying this other thing he said wasn't true.
Yes, exactly.
But I think there's an interesting point in it all of the... there's a fantastic book by Ash Sarkar called Minority Rule, where she talks about how this kind of woke culture from, say, the mid-2010s, where things are all kind of focused around identity and grievance and who has the hardest bit in life. And I think this is an amalgamation of, outside of plagiarism and things like that, there is also an aspect of these kind of conversations where you go, OK, who has it harder and who should be elevated more? And I think this is someone that's benefited from creating a story of themselves through that kind of narrative.
And it's a story that many people wanted to believe. They wanted to say this incredible, even though it was contradictory at various points, if people had cross-referenced these things. But who does? How many people get to check CVs? You would imagine Cambridge University would.
Well, you would, wouldn't you?
Yes,
I mean, if anybody's missed all of this, it attended protests as a child, but separately reports an inability to tolerate loud noises, even the sound of a fork scraping on a plate. took part in all kinds of unspecified fundraising, but previously claimed that he single-handedly raised $5.5 million for charity. Now,
then he said that it was actually 100 people, but he couldn't name them because they'd all signed non-disclosure agreements. Famously, when people run a marathon, they never want you to know about it. I don't know about your email and your WhatsApp, but I mean, it seems that the world is white running a marathon. I used to be one of those people. I did a marathon in 2012. I said did a marathon, not run a marathon, for factual reasons. A little bit of breaking news here, and this is the former anti-Semite hired as a party advisor by Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch has apologised to a Labour politician he harassed. This is Joshua Bonehill-Payne. He was convicted in 2016 of racially aggravated harassment against Luciana Berger. She was then an MP. She's now a Labour member of the House of Lords. He's now publicly apologised to her on the Daily Telegraph's Daily Tea podcast. He said, "Luciana, the way how I treated you was appalling. I'm incredibly sorry for that. Many years ago, the ordeal that I put you through was disgusting, and I hope that one day you will forgive me. But all I can say to you is that I will continue to work in this space to fight anti-Semitism. I have nothing but great admiration for the work you've done in anti-Semitism. I think that it is really brave, really incredible after everything you've gone through. I'm sorry for the bottom of my heart." Well, earlier on Twitter, she said, "More than 9 years on, I'm still affected by his crimes. I'm all for rehabilitation, but someone convicted of neo-Nazi misogynistic crimes is not suitable for public office less than a decade after his conviction, and neither should he be gifted a national advisory role even closer to power. It is still not too late for Badenoch to listen to victims and reverse her decision." So this is a development in the story. No word on whether the public apology from Luciana Berger has been accepted. From Joshua Bonehill-Payne, apologies to Luciana Berger, apologies for that, has been accepted. What do you make of this, Sean?
It's a strange one to double down after giving the person the opportunity to run for local candidacy and then to say, well, actually, we're going to give them a job in the top office as a, what was it, an anti-extremism
advisor. Yeah. I mean, he has done a 180 from his previous horrendous neo-Nazi anti-Semitism. That's what he alleges anyway.
You say that, but he's also running a social media account that creates AI videos that are meant to be satirical, but actually veer into the highly offensive of a lot of politicians in the UK. It's not just characters on the left, it's also people like Kemi Badenoch, Nigel Farage.
Are you talking about the Crew Current Gazette? That's the same guy? Okay.
Yeah, it's the same guy. He runs that channel.
Okay.
So, I mean, you're talking about a person who is, of course, saying that they're regretful and apologetic for the things they were convicted of in the past. But I mean, when you look at some of the social media activity,
and also, I mean, it kind of offended Kemi Badenoch that much, but it's a good point. The point is as well, he's doing this in a public podcast, but he's not actually just contacting Luciana Berger and saying, "I'm sorry," nor did he do that before he stood to be a councillor or indeed as this advisor. What do you think, Jo?
No, this kind of apology and, you know, regret for past deeds done in a public forum, I really don't think hold much water. They're simply there for the show and not actually heartfelt or followed up, if you like, you know. By
You'd imagine a private letter or something like that would be more appropriate.
Yes, it would. And if that then later got publicised, you know, by whomever, that's one thing. But to simply do this in the public arena, I think, is very questionable.
OK. Thank you both very much indeed. That is Jo Wheeler, the broadcaster and meteorologist, and Sean Hickey, who's head of content at Politics. Jo, appreciate you coming in. Graham says, "I've just heard Nigel Farage talking about deporting foreign nationals to El Salvador. Here we go again. If we execute a lot of them, then it will only cost the executioner's fee. Job done." Graham, cannot support you on that. Don't support the death penalty. Sorry about that. Mick in Wallington says, "The left have made this country a country of self-hate and division. Burnham has no interest in listening because he's been deaf to your long-vented complaints. His bus is a diversion stunt." Richard says, "Lefty Sean the apologist, sure you put him on to wind the people up." It is called the debate desk. We do want some debate. We'd rather people just didn't agree with every single thing that they say. I'm not sure what he's an apologist for. Maybe that moustache.
Yeah, what's he referring
to? Maybe the moustache. You should apologise for it. Paul, it should a long apology, written apology, please. Paul in Kent says, "What would the effect be if we carried out military exercises in the English Channel?" Lots of people do make that point. And Nick says, "Your panel guest reminds me of Fergal Sharkey from the Undertones. Great panel tonight." I mean,
he's not the first to say that.
Really?
Yeah. I used to work in a bar years ago, and I got it more often than
Okay, well, there are worse things to be called. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Nigel Farage is off to El Salvador because he thinks that the prisons there are a place we could put foreign nationals whose countries won't take them back. It's a radical plan. He outlined it today. There is a former prison governor who is going with him to El Salvador. We'll talk to her in just a moment. We'll also talk this evening about the PC Andrew Harper controversy, the rules around that, the legality of that, what the Prime Minister wants to do. He's back from his holidays and will be going around the country to do a tour to see what the main problems are. Why doesn't he know what they are already, I suppose many people might ask, and many people have been left in unnecessary distress by what's been called the early release roller coaster. Also on Reform UK, they've dropped a third in a bombshell poll. There's a big story tonight that I'm looking forward to getting into because it is a horrendous one for so many people, and I really want to illustrate it and illuminate it. That is a pension firm telling veterans to repay. It has a history of errors. We'll speak to one veteran who served this country well and is in a situation where he's been told to pay back tens of thousands of his overpaid pension. If you're a veteran, if you're maybe part of a military family and you know something about this, please do get in touch. Equally, if you want to talk about anything else that we're discussing this evening or anything you think we should be talking about, the numbers are on the screen right now. 0344 499 1000, that's the number to call. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell on Twitter or at Cardwell Peter on Instagram. You can send me a WhatsApp text message. You can send me a WhatsApp voice note. Keep it to less than a minute. We'll play that out between now and 10. You can also give me a ring. All of that on the main number, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk. So Nigel Farage gave a big press conference today. He is, of course, the leader of Reform UK. We'll get into the prisons issue in just a second, but he also made reference to the Anne Widdecombe investigation. Now, that's an ongoing live police investigation. I'm going to offer no comment on that. What Nigel Farage did, though, was say that was confirm that the police who are looking into what happened to Anne Widdecombe and her alleged murder was they're now the same police officers, I should say, are looking at the firebombing of Nigel Farage's house in the same investigation. This is what Nigel Farage said earlier today.
Of course, most of the media organisations in this room called me a liar. Remember that vividly. Half of you in the room called me a liar. But the truth is, there was an investigation into this, and clearly counter-terrorism made some mistakes, which is why they've referred themselves to the Independent Office of Police Complaints. I understand this is a completely unprecedented move. And yes, this is directly linked to the murder of Anne Widdecombe. And I'm afraid I just can't tell you any more than that at this stage.
The main point of the press conference earlier was for Nigel Farage to talk about foreign criminals. There is an ongoing huge controversy over people being released and the crimes that they have committed, and the fact that we're going to have to release more people because the prison capacity simply isn't there. There's also the issue of people who are released, then commit crimes on licence, being put back into prison, therefore putting even more pressure on the system. Nigel Farage says that one solution he would have is to give all the foreign nationals, that's about an eighth or so, an eighth or a ninth of our prison population, about 10,000 people. He would send them all home to their native countries. If the countries don't take them, he may, in theory, send them to El Salvador. He's going on a trip there in the coming days. Someone who's going with him will be with us in just a second. Vanessa Frake, a foreign prison governor who advises Reform UK on prison policy. Let's hear first from Nigel Farage on his views on El Salvador as a destination for foreign criminals.
This is really quite straightforward. We send people back to their country of origin, So it needs a phone call with Edi Rama from Albania, etc. And if they refuse, we then send foreign national offenders off to third parties. Kosovo is perhaps one good example currently being used by Sweden. And we are organising a trip to El Salvador. And by the way, not all of the prisons, the cages that you've seen on television, and Lee Anderson and Vanessa Frake, the former prison governor, they will both be visiting El Salvador soon. To house a foreign national offender in El Salvador will be half the cost of housing a foreign national offender in this country and will give us more prison spaces.
Vanessa Frake is with us now. She's a Justice Advisor to Reform UK. She's a former prison governor herself. In fact, wrote a book called The Governor. Good evening, Vanessa.
Good evening, Peter. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. How workable is this, do you think? And undoubtedly, there are going to be a lot of people who say, hold on a second, sending people to El Salvador could be a breach of their human rights.
Well, look, you know, the principle is quite straightforward. If a foreign national prisoner is convicted of a serious offence in Britain, why should the British taxpayer have to provide the prison cell for the entire sentence? But I wouldn't pretend, you know, that El Salvador has 10,000 spare cells waiting for Britain tomorrow morning. It doesn't. And then that would be an irresponsible claim. But, you know, Peter, sometimes you've got to take the bull by the horns. Sometimes doing nothing or early releases is not the answer. You've got to look at alternatives. And it's not beyond the realms of possibility. You know, I'm not talking about the CCAT prison that we all saw with the Richard Madeley documentary. I'm talking about everyday normal prisons that meet British standards, prisons that meet access to healthcare, access to legal teams, access to family, etc., etc. I'm not saying, you know, it's going to be perfect. Absolutely not. But what I am saying is it's worth having a look.
How many prisoners do you think we could send there realistically?
Okay, so, you know, we've got around 12,000 foreign nationals. There's about 6,000 or 6,500, I think it is, just over, that are convicted, have been found guilty, and they will be the ones that be going. Anybody who's found guilty would be part of that relay.
So you're still, sorry, I'm just doing a back of the envelope calculation here. So you're still going to have 5,500 prisoners in British jails because they're on remand.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't send somebody to El Salvador if they're on remand. They've got court appearances.
Yes, I understand that. So you're talking really about 6,500 people. How many has Reform UK calculated that would go back to their own countries, do they think, based on current numbers? And how many would actually end up in El Salvador, do you think?
I can't say that, Peter, because at the end of the day, it depends on, you know, we might not have a general election till 28, 29.
Yeah.
So it depends on who's in jail at that time.
But surely you've modelled this and you've looked at the numbers that are there at the moment. So how many of those 6,500, say it was done today, how many do you think would be in El Salvador?
I would say probably 4,000 or 5,000. I'd say that many will want to go back to their country of origin rather than go to El Salvador or Kosovo or wherever we find a treaty to. I'm not saying, you know, look, you can pick it apart as much as you like, Peter, but at the end of the day, surely doing that, freeing up beds.
No, I'm interested in the principle.
The early release scheme, when the likes of, you know, the killers of PC Harper are going to be released at a third of their sentence.
No, listen, I'm not against the principle of it. I'm just interested in the practicality as well. I mean, where are you actually going in El Salvador? What will you see that you want to perhaps repeat or use?
Well, look, I can't tell you that at the moment, Peter.
Okay.
But trust me, as soon as I know, you will be the first to know exactly what prisons we're going to.
So you don't know just yet.
Not the CCAT prison.
Are you not involved in the itinerary here? I mean, as a former prison governor.
Look, I'm working with Lee. With Lee Anderson, and we will discuss it together. it's all about timing. At the moment, we're both at odds with our timings, so it will be this year, but I can't tell you exactly when. But as soon as I know, Peter, you will know.
Excellent. Okay. I mean, when we look at the broader problems about victims left in unnecessary distress by what's going on, I remember saying, you know, I don't mean to sort of be a sort of I told you so kind of person, but I remember a week ago when we were being told about PC Andrew Harper's killers, and I signed the petition, and I urged many other people to sign the petition all week. Yeah. The legality of that is always going to be a big issue, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And if you selectively choose, well, this is a high-profile case, therefore we're going to try and keep these killers behind bars, that's not going to work legally, is it? Because you're going to have all sorts of legal challenge.
Of course you are. And instead of sort of drawing it out, as Andy Burnham did, say he was having another look at it, he should have been honest with the British public. There was absolutely no way he could dig those two out because, like you said, it would have been fraught with legal challenges left, right and centre, not only from the killers of PC Harper, but others who were convicted of manslaughter. Yeah. The Gork report was always going to end up like this. You know, there are many women living in fear at this moment who have struggled and who have managed to get their perpetrators in jail for domestic abuse, domestic violence, these people are now going to be freed. Yes, it's right that we focus on PC Harper, but it's not only his widow and his mother who are affected by this. There are many, many people. And to my mind, the early release scheme is the easy option.
So what should happen, Vanessa? What I should just say before you answer that question, the PC Andrew Harper petition as of a minute ago, 894,451 signatures. It's coming up to 900,000, 36,750 people signed it today. So if you do want to sign that petition, as I have, as Vanessa has as well, you can go to change.org. Just put in change petition Andrew Harper to your search engine and you'll find it. What should have happened? Because we're talking about Nightingale prisons as well. How practical are they, do you think?
Well, look, we had, not 5 years ago, Peter, we had COVID. Nightingale hospitals were thrown up overnight, literally. You know, Nightingale prisons are a possibility. They are purpose-built. They are craned in. Within 12 months, this government could have sorted more prison places out, but they chose not to. They chose to do the easy option, which was to do the early release scheme yet again. This goes back to Jack Straw in the early 2000s when he released over 80,000 prisoners on another early release scheme. It's the easy option. And
so why do you think, so do you then think that the Nightingale issue hasn't been seriously considered by the Ministry of Justice because it is a bit tricky?
Look, anything that the prison service does is a bit tricky. Yeah. Anything that ministers want to do is a bit tricky. If you have the integrity, if you have the nous to do it, if you have the, I nearly said a wrong word then, but if you have the will to do it, you can do it. This is our prime. I
think in El Salvador they might say the cojones to do it.
I was going to say cojones.
That's all right. You can say that. You can say that.
But, you know, things are possible. If you've got the determination, you can do these things. I don't believe for a minute that it is impossible to... We have military bases that are empty round the country. They have a fence around them. That's all you need. We're not saying put high profile, high risk category A prisoners in them. We would put low risk prisoners coming to the end of their sentence in those jails, therefore freeing up more higher category prison places in our current prisons.
And what would you say to local people who, you know, we have people talking about Piddington, for example, asylum centres and so on. They, of course, aren't secure. People can come and go as they want, so it's a different prospect. But if there are people who say, hold on a second, there's a disused military base near me, military, fine, prisoners, no thanks, what would you say to them?
I would say as long as it's secure, as long as there was the level of staffing, as long as they were low-level prisoners, I wouldn't have a problem with it. Actually, prison officers who would live around that area would they'd use shops in the area, they'd use facilities in the area, so it wouldn't be a bad thing. When Whitemore was built, the people around March had huge demonstrations about it. Yeah, absolutely. But actually, now they see it as a positive thing, because the prison officers that live around March use the facilities.
Do you mean March in Cambridgeshire?
Yeah.
I was there yesterday. Okay, interesting. Okay. Yeah, I know, it's funny, I've spoken to people about that as well in that area. Really interesting. Vanessa, thank you. When you get your tickets and your sunblock and all the rest of it, we'll maybe chat again about what's going on in your trip. That is Vanessa Frick there, who is Justice Advisor for Reform UK, former prison governor herself. She wrote a book called The Governor, which must be said in that voice by law. Eileen in Caerphilly says, why are the illegal immigrants allowed legal aid when the rest of us are not? If all these legal rights lawyers have to rely on illegal immigrants paying their fees themselves, how many of them would be acting for them? Gary says Burnham just isn't a serious man. We couldn't trust him to handle a major national or international crisis. He makes Boris look as if he had the mannerisms of an undertaker. That's Gary from Larne in Northern Ireland. Carl in Richmond in South West London says, what I genuinely struggle, I think it's South West London, could be Yorkshire, but I think it's probably South West London. What I genuinely struggle to understand is why this government seems so unwilling to listen to the real concerns of ordinary people across the UK. You could argue Andy Burnham's on his trip round the UK from tomorrow. Maybe that's something he'll listen to, Carl. Carl continues, whatever someone's politics, a democratic government should be prepared to listen, engage, answer difficult questions and respond when a significant number of people feel they are not being heard. What concerns me is the direction this can take when governments start dismissing legitimate public concerns, avoiding difficult debate or treating disagreement as something to be managed rather than listened to. It begins to resemble the behaviour we normally criticise in less democratic regimes. I'm not saying Britain is a dictatorship, but democracy relies on governments remaining accountable to the people they serve. When people increasingly feel ignored, that trust starts to disappear, and that should concern everyone regardless of political persuasion, says Carl. Thank you for that. Lots more to discuss. We'll go to the phones in just a minute. You want to get your voice on the air either in the next few minutes or indeed between now and 10 o'clock, you're very welcome to give me a ring. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
My father was born here, my mother was born here, I was born here, I consider myself British. People with exactly the same credentials, but maybe their family came from the Caribbean or came from India, but they have lived here 2 or 3 generations. They shared language, values, beliefs, integrated, assimilated generations ago. Why is they having babies? Why is that a threat to this country?
So, Julia, you are here acting as a mouthpiece for the regime that currently governs this country.
Oh, do shut up, Charlie. You're embarrassing yourself.
What you're saying is exactly the same thing I've been hearing for my...
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Leslie has been in touch and says, I've been watching and listening to Andy Burnham and I really feel as if he is totally out of his depth. He does not act like a leader. If he was serious, he would meet the residents who have the migrants in their areas. He should stop number 10 North, which is going to cost a huge amount of money, which the country doesn't have. I find him to be shallow and totally ineffectual, says Leslie. Rob says, when released in El Salvador, these criminals are less likely to commit crimes. This is a tough regime. Unlike the UK, Peter, it's that simple. I care, and most care, about the victims. Keith is in Hampshire and has some views on migration, especially with Piddington. So many people in such a tiny village, Keith, and lots of residents very, very unhappy about the plan to house hundreds of people seeking asylum in a nearby disused military barracks. The garrison site could see as many as 1,250 people, more than 3 times Piddington's population, housed the facility. What do you think yourself, Keith?
Cheers for talking to me.
Good to chat.
When I live from a small town on the Hampshire coast, then it's changed. It's not recognisable anymore. You go down the shop and it's there's not one person speaking English, barely. I'm not joking, yeah. But this guy from Piddington, I can't remember his name, but I was listening to it earlier on the radio.
Okay.
He should.
Was he possibly the parish council chairman, Tim McNally?
Yeah,
could that be the person you're talking about?
That's him. Yeah,
okay.
That's him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently, there's only 350 people in the village, or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
And they're moving 1,250.
Yeah, I mean that's gonna substantially change it.
That's quadrupled the population straight away.
Yeah.
I would like to say to him, if he's listening, I would like to get he sounds like a nice bloke, you know, he's fighting for what he wants and he doesn't want his village ruined. Can't you get up a national petition so everybody can phone or put it online?
What about in your area, Keith? I'm interested to hear about your area because proportionately we're not talking about 3 times as many people in your area. We're talking presumably about fewer, but it has changed the character of the place quite dramatically.
Yes, it has. Basically, up until about 10 years ago, you know, it's quite a small town on the south coast in Hampshire, and basically, you walk down the high street today to go to the supermarket or wherever, go to the shops, and you can't hear any English voices at all.
I was actually chatting to someone yesterday whose mother lives in Mansfield, near and.
I've been to Mansfield. Yeah, I used to work there because I was concrete. Yeah, carry on.
Well, you would know about this then, and she said his mother is thinking of moving from there, somewhere very far away from there, because she says that that's another part of the country. Her doorstep is a place where there are a lot of asylum seekers and there's a lot of attacks and lots of problems there, for example. I mean, I suppose the question is, where do you put these people? But then the question even before that is, why are they here in the first place?
Yes, that's exactly what you took the words right out of my mouth. They shouldn't be here in the first place. This country is full, you know, there's no more room at the inn, so to speak. They shouldn't be here in the first place. We don't know where they're from, who they are. They chuck away their passports and
it just seems to me, I don't know about you, Keith, but it just seems to me that the government, by which I mean the Conservatives and Labour, just keep moving them around because they were inexpensive hotels. People said, hold on a second, they shouldn't be in hotels. Right, we'll move them to HMOs, homes of multiple occupancy. We'll move them to these disused places. I mean, they're not processing them, are they? They're not saying, are these people legitimate asylum seekers or not? Yes, OK, we'll put you somewhere else. No, we'll send you home. And they often just don't send them home at all.
No, of course they don't. And what really gets me is they put them up in 4-star hotels, and then they're saying, we're moving out to 4-star hotels. I can't afford to go in a 4-star hotel. Too expensive.
Yeah.
My point is, if you move them out of the 4-star hotels, all you're doing is reshuffling the deck chairs on
moving the problem somewhere else. Keith, really good points there.
Exactly.
Really good points. Thank you for them. That's Keith in Hampshire. Appreciate your call this evening, Keith. Marie is in Barry and has some thoughts on the Nightingale prisons. Marie, do you think this is a good idea?
I do think it's a great idea, but I think nobody's thought it through, because when we had the Nightingale hospitals, which people keep bringing up, we did this during COVID, all those venues were closed. Nobody could go to them. That's why they could...
Well, you're absolutely right. The Nightingale hospitals were not used to any great degree.
No, they weren't, but they were using venues that weren't open to the public.
Yeah, but there are quite a lot of disused military places, for example, that could, in theory... I mean, that place near Piddington, I would imagine, I don't know, and I can't speak for the people of Piddington, but I would imagine they'd probably be...
I know, the Millennium Stadium in Cardiff's capital was set up.
Sure. But I suppose the point I'm making, Marie, is that if you're in Piddington, and I can't say that I speak for people from Piddington, but if you're there, you'd probably rather have a prison near you than an asylum centre that means people can come and go as they please, especially when it triples the population of your... If they're
looking at Nightingale prisons, somebody who's saying, let's look at Nightingale prisons, needs to come up and say which places they would use. Rather than saying it's just really easy to do it because we did it during COVID.
Yeah.
We did it during COVID in lots of places that weren't open.
That weren't being used at the time. It's a very, very valid point, and thank you for it, Marie. Sarah's been in touch as well and says, great show as always. Labour are either really bad at doing their job or they're really good at importing voters. I wonder how many visas have been granted since they came into office, and those voters won't be voting Tory or Reform, will they? Call me cynical. Sarah, I often say, just because you're cynical doesn't necessarily mean you're wrong. Darryl says, I think sending serious criminals to El Salvador is a great idea. Maybe we could just load the illegal immigrants straight onto a ship bound for there and cut out the middlemen, i.e. us, says Darryl in Lincoln. Keith in Lincolnshire says, I don't mind immigration when it's good for the UK, but when do we say enough is enough? It's out of control. The Downing Street cat knows what is wrong with the country. Burnham needs to get a grip and stop all the TikTok videos. If he thinks that makes him a man of the people, he's wrong. Not everyone in the country is interested in social media. We're more concerned about the state the country is in. Dawn says the phony Cambridge professor shows them in a bad light. Why can't they just concentrate on spy rings like they did in the past? Says Dawn. Yeah, there's probably less of a scandal. Well, it wasn't, but I'm saying that flippantly. Of course, it was a massive scandal. Andrew in Salisbury says, what? Minority rule by Ash Sarkar? That's what Sean was talking about a little bit earlier on. Andrew says, it's a terrible book. Total word salad and gaslighting. My 18-year-old niece would better in her A levels. Jason Arday is a sociopath. He couldn't care whose lives he's ruined with his lies and questionable grades he gave out. Well, thank you for that. Loads more to discuss. We will go to the polls, not to the phones, but the polls in a second, because Robert Hayward, who is Lord Hayward, who's a Conservative peer, but also impartially a polling analyst, is going to talk to us about Reform dropping to third place. Labour and the Tories doing a bit better. Is this just a Burnham bounce, or is Nigel Farage right to be properly worried? Whatever your thoughts are, give me a shout. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who has been in touch. Very interesting message from Scott in Surrey. And Scott, I really think this is, it's only halfway through the show, but so far this evening, I think it's probably the best message that I've received, actually, among many very good messages. Scott says, "Evening, Peter. I love the show and the guests." Thank you, Scott. "The one thing I notice with many of your callers is that they seem so uncomfortable when calling out facts around bad and illegal migration. And it's obvious to me that we've got to a point where everyday normal people are worried about being called racist. There's nothing racist about them. They, like me, have genuine concerns." Scott, you're absolutely right. What I want people to know is that I will listen to you. I will put you on the air. We have a lot of people who want to get on the air this evening. I'll put as many of you on the air as I can. Whatever you want to say, however you want to say it within the law, we will broadcast it. If you stray across the line, if you say something, and loads of people don't mean to say stuff, but if you stray across the line and we're in breach of Ofcom codes, I'll sort it out. It's my responsibility, okay? It's my responsibility to keep you, and the producer's responsibility to keep you on the right side of the line. So come on, say what you want to say. Tell me your thoughts on migration or whatever else it is. I'm not going to call you racist if you simply say what you feel about this, about your area changing, about worrying about pressure on services. None of that's racist. It is simply straightforwardly common sense. And if you want to say that on the air, this is the place to do it. 0344 499 1000. So thank you, Scott and Surrey, for that very good and very timely reminder of why we need to have an honest conversation about this. Because once you start saying that things are taboo, once you start saying that we can't talk about things, well, then it gets suppressed and suppressed and suppressed and suppressed, and then it comes out the sides. So I want to be, as much as I can, a haven for people to say what is on their mind. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Let's talk about the polls now, because Reform UK don't seem to be doing so well. They were ahead in many, many polls. Now Labour and the Tories are doing much better. Well, Lord Hayward, Robert Hayward, is one of the leading psephologists, pollsters in the country. Robert, what's going on here? Very good evening to you, by the way.
Good evening. We're having a whole series of polls at the moment, and we've got some real ones on Thursday in Clacton. But the poll you're referring to, I think it's fair to say it's an outlier in that it has Reform much lower than most other polls. But having said that, Reform has been going down in the polls for several months, and there's no question there is a Burnham bounce. The interesting thing about this poll, although I think it is an outlier, is that they ask a slightly different question from all other opinion polls. Most opinion polls say, if there were an election tomorrow, how would you vote? And people know they're not going to be an election tomorrow. So they're expressing an element of disenchantment with whatever when they say that. This particular poll actually asks, at the next general election, how will you vote? And therefore, there is a message quite clear to Reform. They are being used as a protest. Lots of people support Reform quite genuinely, but watch the next election because it might produce a further decline in Reform's vote.
There have been 2 or 3 polls that have suggested that Reform may not be as popular as they have been. As you say, their numbers have been declining over time. Why do you think that is?
There's no question about it. Partly it is a protest, but also because people have taken a dislike to Nigel Farage. There is no one party that is more linked to its leader than Reform and Nigel Farage. And concurrent with the decline in the Reform vote has been the decline in the favourability of Nigel Farage. Less so the decline in his favourability, but more and more people who are undecided have decided against him. And therefore, as Reform goes down, as Nigel Farage goes down, they are linked in a way that most other political parties are not quite so linked.
How is Kemi Badenoch doing, both personally and as in regard to as a leader of her party?
She's improved quite markedly. Basically, she's been rising in personal popularity since last September. She is well received by a much higher proportion of the population than was the case previously. She, however, unlike Nigel Farage being directly linked to Reform's performance in the polls, she is performing much better than the Conservative Party. This is actually a problem that the Conservative Party has had with many leaders, but there is no question that she is well perceived by the population at large and growingly well perceived. Having said that, suddenly politics has changed in terms of the Burnham bounce, and whereas she was looking almost to be in the lead of favourability or most or least unpopular politician, she is now well behind Annie Burnham, who has had a very good bounce, but with the issues you've just been talking about, immigration, and also the release of certain prisoners, this is the real first challenge for Andy Burnham in his premiership, because there's no question that on both matters, he and the Labour Party, Labour government, are going to have a fairly rough ride over the next few weeks.
Given the information we have, and there isn't a general election tomorrow, I don't think there's going to be one for 2 or 3 years. Others may disagree with that. You may disagree with that yourself, Robert. The point, I suppose, is my, not worry, but my, I suppose, feeling is that there may well be a hung parliament after the next election. People are going to have to do business with other parties. I know this is a massive hypothetical, Robert, but do you think that's founded on strong foundations? Do you think that we could be looking at either a leftist coalition or a right-wing coalition when it comes to whatever the government of this country is after the next election?
People's political loyalties are weaker now than they've ever been in my political lifetime, my study of politics and opinion polls. So first of all, your comment about a general election, I agree with you. I don't think there will be a general election in the next few months, specifically because we think that I think there's evidence that the Burnham bounce has probably peaked and may well decline. And because people don't have that strength of loyalty, it's an incredibly risky position to call an election when you may suddenly, just with 1 or 2 events, find that your position has moved from first to third in the opinion polls. In terms of the overall set of circumstances that one looks at, you use the word hypothetical. If people, I wouldn't even predict what an election result would be in December this year. I'm certainly not, therefore, going to start talking about what might or might not be a result, and therefore what might or might not be the coalitions that would form a government, probably in late 2028, because I'm with you. I think there's a long period before we get one. And I'm afraid that's far too hypothetical for me.
Robert, thank you as always. That's Robert Hayward, OBE, Lord Hayward. He's a Conservative peer, but he's also a polling analyst. What do you think of what he said? 0344 499 1000. And Gary says, can you please tell us which poll you're talking about? Yes, of course. This is the Lord Ashcroft poll, finding that Reform UK support has dropped to its lowest level since the 2024 general election at just 18%. Labour continuing to rise steadily in the poll, climbing from 21 to 27, and the Tories on 23%. Now, there will be people who say Lord Ashcroft's polls are something they disagree with. That's fine, and that's fine as far as it goes, I suppose. He would argue, of course, that his polls are rigorously done. The question is that it's not just this poll, there are other polls that are showing Reform's vote declining, and we've seen that with these various by-elections, although, of course, Clacton, which we did the read for earlier on, is happening on Thursday. We'll see what happens there. One texter says people have not gone off Nigel, they have gone off Zia Youssef, who's got too big for his boots, in my opinion, not very likeable. Becca says, I don't believe polls. If I'm stopped in my town, I always lie about where my vote would go. This is after being called racist several times from the people marking the answer during Brexit. Penny in Essex says the trouble is, and which makes a total mockery of this country, are the number of migrants who've been sent back to France only to return in a large dinghy. It is utter lunacy. Robert says, forget the Nightingale idea. How many warehouses that can be repurposed in 2 weeks for low-category prisoners? Many stand empty. There's no money around for people to create a business. Dawn in Durham says, El Salvador prison was built in just 7 weeks. Like Vanessa said, where there's a will, there's a way. I've read her book. We need to listen to people who've been there and got the T-shirt. Ernie says, says the reason foreign countries won't take back their criminals is because it would cost them money to keep them jailed. Why don't we offer the criminals an amnesty and the fare if they go home, and then ban them from returning without applying for a visa in the future? Their countries can't stop them coming home then, says Ernie. Yeah, but then they receive no punishment. I'm sure many victims of crime would be quite worried about that, Ernie, but it's an interesting idea. David in the Cotswolds says, great show as always. Thank you, David. Listen to all the subjects on tonight's programme, from the early release of prisoners, which is basically letting people off, through to the mega illegal dinghy, which is essentially saying there is no border control. Isn't it fair to say that the United Kingdom is wrecked? Prior to the civil unrest exploding, which looks like this is going to happen, can we have a programme of which country is safe for British people to move to? Because if this country is finished without a great reform, in David's opinion. Sue says these invaders should be confined to barracks if they're to be housed there, with no access to the surrounding area until they can be deported. Dawn says we only need to look back on life in the UK to see how much change has happened. Older people would say that everything is gone. It will never return, says Dawn in Chelmsford. Joanna says, hi Cardi P. Hi Joanna from Salisbury. She says people moving to get away from changing areas because of migrants, their properties are devalued as no one wants to buy them. Then one of your regular contributors earlier said she had moved. Now the new area is becoming full of them. She can't keep running. It's our country and we have the right to feel safe. You're absolutely right. Phil in Portsmouth says, imagine you booked an all-inclusive hotel and got told you were going to be moved to self-catering. Moving all the migrants around is just going to make them more angry and provocative and cause them more trouble. They need to be removed properly. Full stop, says Phil in Portsmouth. In relation to the Clacton by-election, we briefly talked about that earlier. We did do a full read of candidates earlier, but you can head to whocanivotefor.co.uk for a full list of candidates standing. Next, I want to talk about something that's really quite concerning. It's about veterans and their pensions, and veterans being told after many years of receiving pensions that actually they've got too much and have to repay some of it. It's a huge scandal. I don't think enough people are talking about it. On my show, it's my show, but it's your show too, and it was actually a viewer who came to me with this story, and that often happens. People contact me on Twitter or LinkedIn or email me through my website, whatever you want to do, and suggest stories. We don't always cover them, but if it's a good one like this one that affects many people, of course we will. It's a good story, but bad, very bad indeed for the people involved. We're going to speak to a veteran called Peter Sharples in a second and hear what happened to him. So stay with us here on Talk, and if you've been affected by this, or you have something to contribute, or even just an opinion on it, please give me a shout. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on the Evening Exchange on Talk.
My father was born here, my mother was born here, I was born here, I consider myself British. People with exactly the same credentials, but maybe their family came from the Caribbean or came from India, but they have lived here 2 or 3 generations. They shared language, values, beliefs, integrated, assimilated generations ago. Why is they having babies? Why is that a threat to this country?
So, Julia, you are here acting as a mouthpiece for the regime that currently governs this country.
Oh, do shut up, Charlie. You're embarrassing yourself,
what you're saying is exactly the same thing I've been hearing from my...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
When people serve our country, I want them to be properly looked after, and there are lots of ways I want them to be looked after. I want them to be as safe as possible. I want them to be have the right equipment. I want them to have the right uniforms. I want them to have the right accommodation. I want them to be paid fairly. And when they retire, I want them to be looked after as veterans in lots of ways. Physical health, mental health, housing, employment. There are lots of ways I think we can do things better in this country. If someone dons a uniform to serve this country, which I have never done, and does so with great bravery and distinction, as the vast majority of soldiers do, and airmen and seamen and all the rest of it, and women, of course, as well, they have the right to a good pension, a decent pension. But now a pensions firm at the centre of a scandal has left more than 1,000 veterans with life-changing bills and has been penalised 42 times for significant failures in the last 6 years. This involves a company called Sopra Steria, a French-owned consultancy. We have a statement from them, which we will read in a second. Also, the Ministry of Defence is involved. But the people at the sharp end of this are people who have actually served our country. We'll speak in a second to the Chief Executive of We Served, a former British Army officer, Hugh Andre. We'll talk to him. But I want to speak to Peter Sharples first, who is a veteran. Peter, thank you for joining me on the programme this evening. Can you tell me what happened to you and the amount of money you were asked for back?
Good evening, Peter.
Good
Thanks
evening.
For on your show. There's two elements to this. One is what you've just described with the pension society claiming this money back. Mine's with DWP. So I had a bad stroke several years ago, and lots of other ailments forced me to have to pack in work. And I'm only 59 now, which is very frustrating when you've been 100 miles an hour all your life. So I informed DWP in March 2024, saying that my military pension was being paid out 3 years early due to decline in health and not being able to work full-time before 60. So I informed DWP, and they said, yes, that's fine. Thanks for letting us know. Bearing in mind, that was when the Tories were still in power.
Yeah.
Back in January 25 of last year, I had an email doing a reassessment on the journal, said, yeah, blah, 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 you do the interview. And they say, I see you're receiving a pension. And I said, yeah, I declared it in March 24.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, right, okay. Well, that's classed as unearned income. So, cut a long story short, Peter, they said, you've been overpaid. And I said, I can't be overpaid because it's earned income as per the MOD.
And it's your money, yes.
Absolutely, you know, and as per parliamentary letter that I had from 11 cross-party MPs signed at the time. So I was a bit shocked, to be honest with you.
How much did they say you owed them?
£8,800 in overpayments.
Okay,
now,
that's not a small amount of money.
No, it's not a small amount of money. Not when you took your pension to obviously to try and look after yourself and your family.
Sure, of course.
And at the time, I didn't think I had much longer left to live, so I wanted to make sure that the family were fine. So my gratuity payment, which was just over £15,000 terminal gratuity, that's a one-off tax-free lump sum that's paid to people.
That's the kind of lump sum when you retire, isn't it?
Yeah. And say, like, you know, and thanks for your service and blah, blah. I did 12 years, but first 2 years were boys' time, you know, so,
sure.
And they've even deducted money off that as well. Now, this went on for many, many months, Peter, and I actually went to a mandated reconsideration notice. Now, during this time, I was very active on media, especially LinkedIn, and then I had other people coming towards me saying, that's interesting, and as the story broke, and back end of last year, because the mandated reconsideration notice still went against me, I was destroyed. They removed the £50 civil penalty that they admitted they gave me wrongly because I did declare it. So if they did that, why didn't they wipe the debt off in the first place? Because it was their error. Now, my MP, Patrick Hurley, Labour, he actually wrote to DWP and said, well, it's your mistake. This needs to be written off. He never even had a reply back.
Yeah.
So we carried on. So at the end of last year, I was on the suicide watch for 2 months because I was that bad.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
I have severe complex PTSD, and I've been here before, you know, but I just thought, what is the point? Really, what is the point of carrying on? So we went to a tribunal, and that was in April of this year, at the 30th of April. DWP never turned up. It was just me and the judge, and we're chatting like I'm chatting to you. She turned around and said, listen, you're not the first veteran to appear in front of me with the same issue. I'm not supposed to give advice, but I will. You need to go for a judiciary review, because this is the only way we can change it. So in this time, I'm still obviously posting quite a lot on LinkedIn, and I get other people coming towards me about this pension scam thing. We've been overpaid when we want 32 grand back, which is one ex-colonel I'm helping at the minute, an ex-Royal Navy warrant officer, £54,000. You know?
Yeah, I was reading the other day as well. Steve Skidmore, 71, said he owed £124,000 after his pension was overpaid incorrectly for 16 years. In February last year, Nick Tatlock, who's 72, received a notice of overpayment stating he needed to repay £39,300 accrued over a 16-year period. These are all people who've served our country. You served our country for 12 years. You were in the army, Peter?
Royal Navy.
Royal Navy. And where did you serve?
I served on 4 ships. 3 of them were Type 22 frigates, HMS Brilliant, Brazen, Cornwall, and the Type 21 frigate Alacrity. And I also served shore base as an air traffic controller.
Just stay where we are for a second, Peter. This is an appalling way to treat people who have served our country. Absolutely appalling. Let's go to Hugh Andre for a second. I'll come back to you, Peter, in just in a second.
Yeah, no problem.
Hugh is Chief Executive of We Served, a former British Army officer himself. Hugh, what the hell is going on here?
Good evening, Peter.
Good evening.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity. This came to my attention, as do quite a few issues to do with the armed forces. And, you have to remember that those who are serving are sort of bound by, let's call them gagging orders, but, they can't speak out. And so, years ago, I set up We Serve with a team so that we could speak on behalf of those who served. And Peter, I've had more and more individuals contacting We Served to say, yeah, this happened to me. I'm aware of someone who's been asked to repay £139,000. And it has an absolute, it just smells of the horizon post office.
And what has actually happened here? Why have these pensions been overpaid?
Okay, so my understanding is the DWP sits at the top, obviously managing the MOD's pension. Now, I have a pension. I have no idea what it's worth. It started in 1989. Whatever gets issued to me when I'm of the age, frankly, like most people,
Oh, I think we're perhaps losing Hugh there. Have we got him back there? No, we've lost him. Now, I want to go back to Peter just in a second, but I better read these statements first to give them right of reply. And a Ministry of Defence spokesman said, we recognise that this error may cause uncertainty for people, and we have contacted all those affected and are providing support for anyone who requires it. Where payments have been made in genuine error, we have a responsibility to recover taxpayer funds, and will always seek to do so in a sensible and proportionate way, including through tailored repayment plans and one-to-one financial and welfare support from veterans' services. And the company that is at the French-owned consultancy Sopra Steria that want retired personnel to pay for miscalculations has said the errors that led to incorrect pension payments originated over a decade before Sopra Steria took over the contract in 2020. As soon as our teams identified the root causes, we immediately raised this with the MOD. Whether and how any recouping of taxpayers' money took place was not a decision for Sopra Steria. We are working closely with the MOD and Equinity, who are responsible for the pension calculations and payment, to ensure robust safeguards are in place for the long term. We recognise how difficult the situation has been for impacted veterans and their families and regret the distress caused. All those affected have access to dedicated support services, including a Veterans Helpline and welfare team assistance. Is that good enough, Hugh?
No, and Peter, we have a number of organisations involved here, who are what known as pensions administrators. So there's Sopra Steria, as you've already mentioned, and also Equinity.
Yep.
Okay. And
they're in this statement. They're responsible for the pensions calculation and payment. Yep.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, mistakes have been made by the administrators, by those responsible for making the payments. The mistakes are not due to the veterans, and they've been overpaid. Now, the government can waive these payments, but take homelessness, it's going to have a serious effect on, aging veterans' health.
Yeah. Well, and it has, and Hugh, you're absolutely right, and it has had an effect on Peter, certainly. Peter, do you feel this is moving in the direction of being solved?
No, not at all. I mean, DWP have just doubled down on the stance, I mean, I've had 6, 7 veterans contacting me today, again, with the same problems with DWP itself. So whilst there's 2 separate issues here, it's rather coincidental that it's actually been sort of come out under Labour. So when the Telegraph article was issued a week last Sunday on my behalf, that's why I suggested the Healthline a stealth raid, because when we declared it under Tories, they just said, fine, let's carry on. Now, these 1,000 people are affected by the what you was just talking about there. There's 68,000 veterans on DWP. So there's a lot more who are going through the same. I had one ex-veteran today, a 40-year-old, and she can't even pay for her food anymore because of these misconduct.
That is absolutely outrageous. Listen, we're just coming up to the news. I want to thank Peter Sharples, and I want to thank Hugh Andre for the Chief Executive for WeCert. We are going to return to this story tomorrow night because there's so much more to say on this. And Peter, I know you're still on the line. I want our producers to talk to you and get more information. I want to return to this story tomorrow. There's a lot more to say on this, and I think there are people like Peter who are being negatively impacted by it. And if you are one of those people, if you have views on this, you let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk about this more tomorrow night because there's a lot more to say on it, and I think we've just touched the tip of the iceberg this evening. 0344 499 1000. Do stay with us here on Talk. And if you've been affected by the themes discussed, you can contact the Samaritans on 116 123.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
The It's just gone 9 o'clock. This is the Evening Exchange on Talk. Thank you for your company. I'm Peter Cardwell. Loads to discuss between now and 10. We're getting messages and calls from veterans. If you want to discuss this story about veterans' pensions, how we treat those who have served our country, a fair pension for their service, I think is the very least that we can offer them. 0344 499 1000. We'll talk about Farage and prisons. We'll talk about polling and votes. Well, I mentioned the Ashcroft poll earlier on. There's another poll as well, which we should be discussing as well, an Ipsos poll, Ipsos Mori, saying that Labour is leading Reform UK by 3 points. We'll talk about all of that in a second. The Associate Political Editor and cat person, Rachel Cunliffe of The New Statesman, will be with us very, very shortly. Keep your calls, text, tweets and voice notes coming in. The immigration issue and the 230 people on the not very small boat is a big issue that lots of people want to talk about. 0344 499 1000, the number to call. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell on Twitter or at Cardwell Peter on Instagram. You can send me a WhatsApp voice note, less than a minute please. We'll play those out between now and 10. You can send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring on the main number 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss between now and 10 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. He's a veteran. He said I had a similar thing with the Department of Work and Pension regarding benefits, or wrongly assessed. They underpaid me for 2 years. Upon my inquiries, I also underwent mandatory reconsideration with a flat no, I'm wrong. So I took it to tribunal. That took 18 months. The DWP didn't turn up in front of the judge. That's the second case we've heard about of that. We heard about that from Peter as well. So I took it to tribunal. DWP didn't turn up. The judge said they haven't got a case and I don't understand why I've been put through this. I was reimbursed missing funds. The worst bit is you'll find on the job sites adverts for DWP and HMRC decision makers going for less than £18 an hour only on a temporary basis. That is who you're being judged by in the first instance. You've no recourse to talk to them directly. They just decide and hope you give up. It is disgusting, says Testy. Gary says the DWP want this veteran to pay back £8,000 while Angela Rayner, who had to resign from being a government minister to avoid getting sacked over her dodgy tax arrangements, got to keep her £17,000 payoff even though she's back in the same job a year later, and politicians wonder why we hold them in such contempt. Sim in Wanstead says they were paid too much. I'm sorry, our veterans should never be paid enough for their sacrifices and service. I think whoever was responsible for paying them too much should pay it back. Where are they meant to find that kind of money? Their armpits? I am shaking with anger. Sue says, why don't the MPs forfeit their exorbitant pensions? Our veterans deserve a decent pension. We will return to this story tomorrow, let me tell you, and we're going to be on the phone to those people, getting more examples. If you have an example, if you're a case study, if you have someone who has been dealt a bad blow by DWP, by the MOD, by this company involved as well, we read out their statement earlier, 0344 499 1000. Bit of breaking news, and that is that PC Andrew Harper's mother has asked Andy Burnham to meet her about the early release scheme. She has asked the Prime Minister to explain why her son's killers cannot be exempt from the government's early release scheme. It comes after Downing Street said it was not possible to exempt one or two offenders convicted of manslaughter from early release, and we know that petition is getting close to 1 million. Perhaps we'll talk about that first, actually, with Rachel Cunliffe. She's the Associate Political Editor of The New Statesman. Rachel, you're very welcome to the programme. Good evening to you.
Good evening, hi.
There's clearly a big issue for Andy Burnham when it comes to the Harper case, but it is illustrative of a broader problem with this early release scheme. I would imagine Andy Burnham will probably take that meeting, but it's not going to be a comfortable one for him, is it?
Everything about this is hugely uncomfortable. The fact that the scheme is even necessary in the first place because of the chronic, dangerous overcrowding in our prisons, which goes back, more than a decade. And also any time that you have a scheme that tries to distinguish between very difficult cases, gradations of harm, it's going to be very emotive. I would just say, and perhaps this is not the view of many of your viewers tonight, but I am very uncomfortable with the idea that it should be up for politicians to step in and intervene with the legal system. We have a legal system, we have judges, we have juries, we have sentencing guidelines that are all separate from a politician. My heart absolutely goes out to the family of PC Harper, but I'm quite uncomfortable at the idea of the Prime Minister stepping in because some cases are deemed, more emotionally resonant than others.
I totally share that. Let me tell you something. I signed that petition. I am one of those 900,000 people who signed that petition, and I would dearly love for PC Harper's killers to be brought back in prison, just as I think anyone convicted of manslaughter should not be out of prison and should not be on this early release scheme. But you're absolutely right. You cannot selectively apply the law. If you do it retrospectively, that's difficult. If you create law and then implement it retrospectively, that's tricky. Also, PC Harper's family, and this is a case that has absolutely outraged correctly many people, including me, to the extent that I signed a petition, which is something I don't usually do. We're in a situation, though, where there are loads of, many hundreds, thousands of cases that there are many people who would say, my domestic abuser, my rapist, someone who's involved in the murder or whatever, or alternatively somebody robbed my shop or someone who burgled my house, shouldn't be released early, and it can't be applied selectively because you're just storing up problems. And the last thing I would want to happen, Rachel, is for these scumbags who were involved in the murder of PC Andrew Harper to be given compensation by something like a court in Strasbourg, which I think is not outside the realms of possibility. And that is a very real problem for the Ministry of Justice and for Andy Burnham.
Yeah, if you have a system where, two people who are convicted of the same category of crime, one of them is eligible and one of them isn't because the politicians got involved, then there will be legal challenges to that. And, you could ask, in this case, why were they charged with manslaughter in the first place, as opposed to murder? Murderers are already exempt. You could also talk about the sentence that they got originally, whether the judge was too lenient in that sense. But I think we've also got to see the prisons overcrowding crisis in the context of the 80,000 cases that are still in the backlogs, that are still waiting. Many of them very, very serious, violent crimes. There are victims there too.
And that would double the prison population as well. The backlog would double the prison population if all those people were convicted and went to prison.
Indeed, and there are victims there who are waiting, 3, 4, 5 years for their case to come to court, who are also, they have their lives in limbo, and dangerous individuals are out and potentially causing more harm. And until we get to grips with the prisons crisis and the criminal justice crisis as a whole, which I think involves two things, one of which is just building more prisons, and the other is having a very serious conversation about whether we do imprison too many people. I mean, our prison rates are almost twice that of Germany. They're the highest, one of the highest in Europe. We have to have that conversation. If we decide that we do want to imprison that many people for that length of time, okay, we've got to build some more prisons, because otherwise it's just going to be a perpetual crisis.
You're absolutely correct. Let's talk about a couple of the polls, the Ashcroft poll and the Ipsos poll as well. Lord Ashcroft, his poll finds Reform UK support dropped to its lowest level since the 2024 general election. We were talking about that with Robert Hayward earlier. Also, an Ipsos poll shows Labour leading Reform by 3 points, yet 7 in 10 remain dissatisfied about how the government is running the country. 4 in 10 say they don't have a view on how Burnham is performing as Prime Minister. There isn't an election tomorrow, of course, but this will be worrying reading for Nigel Farage, possibly good reading for Andy Burnham, although the Burnham bounce perhaps was inevitable. I wonder what your thoughts on that are, Rachel.
I think there are a couple of factors here. One of them is definitely the Burnham bounce, as you say. I'm not surprised that lots of people don't have a strong opinion yet about how well he's doing, because it's been the summer recess. He hasn't had a chance to do all that much, but he's going to go on a cost of living tour around the country, introducing himself to voters and trying to signal and communicate that he understands their concerns. We'll just have to see when it gets back in September, when he starts making some really tough decisions, if that holds. But that clearly has had an effect on how the public see Labour, and therefore the impact on those polls. The other two factors, one of which is Nigel Farage and his money troubles, and actually the multiple financial questions hanging over the Reform Party about donations. Richard Tice, this donor, all of which Reform says are all above board, but those questions keep coming and they haven't been answered to a satisfactory level to date. And then the third factor, and this should really worry Reform, is the emergence of Restore as a challenger, which we saw in the Manchester mayoral election taking, was it 9%? And for an insurgent party that only has one MP, that's really, really damaging for the party that used to be the insurgent party that didn't have any MPs, but trying to gain momentum there. So I think they're fighting on multiple fronts at the moment, and it'll be interesting to see again when we get back to September if they can recover from it.
When we look at what has happened with the boats, or specifically one boat having 230 people coming across in it, we see this innovation that is happening all the time when it comes to getting would-be asylum seekers across the channel. I mean, Andy Burnham says he's going to be relentless in dealing with it. Do you sense that he has been relentless?
I think his rhetoric has been strong on it, but Keir Starmer's rhetoric was strong on it. And
so was Rishi Sunak. He was going to stop the boats. Keir Starmer said he was going to smash the gangs. I mean, we hear a lot on this, and the problem, well, they will argue 44% lower than last year, but when you see that image, and it is a very arresting image of 230 people coming across in a boat, it's not good for the government. It's not good for the Home Office.
No, these images are not good for the Home Office. I do think, you said it yourself, small boat crossings are down. So I think the first thing is to look at why are they down? Is it because of the fledgling deal with France? Is it because of the changes to the asylum process here in the UK and the process for gaining settled status and citizenship that makes it less appealing? Look at what has been working, because something clearly has been working, not as much as the government would like, but there have been steps and there has been progress, and try and do more of that. But I think there is a real risk, and as you say, successive prime ministers have found this. You talk tough on this, you say we're going to fix it. If you then don't fix it, voters, they don't just automatically forget.
Yes, they do. They do tend to remember, especially when it comes to these big issues. Rachel, as always, superb analysis. Thank you, the Associate Political Editor of the New Statesman, Rachel Conliffe there. Thanks to Jason, who says, good evening, Peter. What do we get from the BBC? A record 230 people cross the channel in a small boat. On what planet is a boat carrying 230 people small? Would they feel any different if 230 people paraglided in or arrived in an armada of speedboats? What will it take for the establishment to wake up to this invasion? Detain and deport is the only answer, says Jason. Gary says, let's be real, this isn't a Burnham bounce. It can't be, because except for capping bus fares at £2, which was the cap that was in place when Labour came to government, and taking 85p a week off our energy bills, he has done nothing to justify a bounce. It's just a Starmer relief, and that will fade pretty quickly unless Burnham starts coming up with solutions to this country's problems. Becca said, I won't sign that petition. It has turned into one family. Not all victims, especially domestic violence, are now and many of them are probably in a major panic. Catherine says, why are any dangerous criminals being let out early, let alone cop killers? We'll talk more to you. The number is, of course, 0344 499 1000. Some reaction coming on that story about veterans' pensions as well. Whatever you want to talk about it, however you want to make your point, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk.
My father was born here, my mother was born here, I was born here, I consider myself British. People with exactly the same credentials, but maybe their family came from the Caribbean or came from India, but they have lived here 2 or 3 generations. They shared language, values, beliefs, integrated, assimilated generations ago. Why is they having babies? Why is that a threat to this country?
So, Julia, you are here acting as a mouthpiece for the regime that currently governs this country.
Oh, do shut up, Charlie. You're embarrassing yourself.
What you're saying is exactly the same thing I've been hearing for my...
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Neil's been in touch and says, evening Cardi P, don't forget the Tories had Rwanda never given the chance to succeed. Well, you could argue the Tories themselves didn't give it the chance to succeed because they called the election. If they hadn't, maybe we would have seen whether those flights would have taken off. Whatever you want to say, however you want to say it, 0344 499 1000. We'll take some calls in just a second, but I want to play a couple of voice notes first. You can send those in on the same number. Let's hear Steve on migrant boats.
Good evening, Peter. Right, here's the thing about letting in the migrants. They come on that big, massive boat with 200 of people. In the next few months, year, whatever, you could get a boat with 600 people or maybe 1,000. You could even park a bloody Sea Link ferry full of them and they'd still take them in. But if you're not going to stop them now and they consider it racist or whatever to stop them, what happens in 10, 15 years? They're still going to carry on letting them in. They're going to stop it somewhere because we're going to be full. We're going to be overcrowded. It's going to be literally like a football stadium disaster, but just walking down the street. So stop it now, because at some point someone's going to get called racist for stopping it. But I can't see the end of this, and I'd love to know what they've got planned for all these people.
Well, this is exactly the point, Steve. You know, they innovate all the time. They're in small boats with 1 or 2 people, then they become boats with 70 people, now they're 230 people. The government and the French authorities need to do something about it. They would say they're doing something, but they haven't dealt with the problem properly to the extent that someone doesn't feel that that boat can go across. Martin's been in touch and apparently has a question on polling. Here's Martin's voice note.
Good evening, Peter. The polling showing Reform in third place behind Labour and the Conservatives, I find astonishing. I'm 67. I've never, ever been asked to take part in any poll about politics. I've never been asked my views by anyone on the street, if that's where it happens. So how does it work? I see you've been well and truly into the political world for some time, so maybe you could advise me on how polls work, where they're taken, which areas are they taken. Is this in Islington, this poll? I wouldn't be surprised then with that result, but I hope you can answer that. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. I'm not an expert on polling, but I know a bit about it. And most polling is done online these days. Used to be phone calls. Now it's done online. So if you want to be on YouGov's panel, for example, which I am, thousands of people are, and you get an email and they ask you for your opinion, and you go back and they know about you, they know about how you voted at the last election because you tell them where you live. And what happens is polls just can't be done in any area. There are all sorts of standards that have to be properly adhered to. And they've got to be geographically weighted as well. They've got to say, right, well, if they're doing 1,000 people or 1,500 people, something like that, you can say, right, well, we only had 200 people in Lincolnshire, or when we should have had 300 people in Lincolnshire. Therefore, we'll weight it. The principle of polling is essentially you don't need to eat a whole bowl of soup to know what the soup tastes like. That's the general principle of it. Joe Twyman is very good on this. He explains it very, very well. I once went to a lecture that he gave that explained the whole thing. But either if they're not a member of the British Council of Polling, don't believe them, is my thought on that. And also polling is only ever a snapshot of a moment in time, because often people say, oh, 6 months ago poll said this, that was so wrong. It's like, yeah, because 6 months ago people believed that. It doesn't mean they believe it now. And they go up and down all the time. I hope that answers your question, Martin. If it doesn't, message me again. If you have more specific inquiries, I will try to answer them. As I say, I'm not an expert per se. I know a decent amount about polling, and generally it is accurate, and it's the best we have as well. And there are lots of polls I would love to disagree with, but just because I disagree with them doesn't make them wrong, sadly. Ashton says, I find the Reform dip in the polls quite interesting. I'd be interested to see how much traction is heading directly from the Reform to the Tories and Labour, or if their dip is largely heading in the direction of Restore Britain and other small parties. Let's speak to Debbie in Lincolnshire as some thoughts on the veterans issue. And just to be absolutely clear, the Sopra Steria issue, which we were talking about a little bit earlier on, that's separate to the DWP issue that Peter was dealing with. The overall effect, though, is that many veterans saying that they are not getting their full pension, or they're getting too much and being asked to repay it, sometimes huge amounts of money. Debbie, what's your thought on this?
So I'm still currently at the Philadelphia in Corfu.
Oh, you're in Corfu? Debbie's still in Corfu. Not in Lincolnshire, but in Corfu.
Anyway, so I've got a couple of friends. I'm a veteran. I've got a couple of friends who are going through these problems, but I've also got another friend who got divorced in March and was awarded by the court part of her husband's pension, because that's how it rolls. She was told she would have the payment in a couple of weeks. She still has nothing, is currently going through losing her house because she is getting nothing from this pension company. She's even written to her MP, and even the MP is basically coming and hitting a brick wall. And I just think this is completely wrong. These people have put their lives on the line for us through their years of service.
Yes, they have.
And they should be entitled to what they've paid into, as you know, and what they deserve, which is their pensions. And I do agree with what I heard from We Serve the other day. This could actually lose lives, because if I got hammered with a bill for, you know, 8,500 or 100,000, I would cry a lot.
Well, there are people who were being told by We Served, and we are going to talk to them more and cover this more tomorrow, who are not eating because they have to pay back this money that they were overpaid in the first place. You would wonder why they can't just get it right. As I say, there are two separate issues, the DWP issue and the issue with Sopra Steria. The net result is the same. People having huge bills that they're really struggling to pay back.
Yep. And it's just heartbreaking, because you do sit back and think, why did I bother? My husband's still serving. Where we're at the moment, a family we know, and a serving army officer here as well, and they're all now worrying. And I don't, you know, they shouldn't be worrying. They should just be doing their job to the best of their ability, you know, doing us proud, and knowing that because of their years of service, I mean, one's done 22, the other one's done 27 years, that is, that they are going to get what they've worked hard for at the end of it, and not be told it's wrong, because I think that's the biggest worry. They've got PTSD, you know, they've seen so much. They just want to see what they do at the end of it. And I think they're entitled to it, because we seem to be able to find the money to pay other people.
Yes. And people aren't asking for more than they're entitled for. They're simply asking for what they're entitled for, to be paid accurately, in a timely way, the right way, done properly. And that's just not happening.
Correct. And I think with people like, you know, organisations as great as WeServe.com, they're really looking into it. They're trying to support everybody and get the details. And I think, please don't sit at home panicking, worrying, you know, getting upset. Talk to them, because that's what they're there for. They're there for veterans.
Debbie, just before you go, I hear you had a significant birthday. It was your 32nd the other day. Is that correct?
I was 50.
No, you weren't. Don't be ridiculous.
I was born in 76. So yes, I was 50 on Sunday.
Well, you're not old, you're classic. Many happy returns, Debbie, and a very happy birthday to you.
Oh, thank you very much, and thank you for taking my call.
No worries, that's Debbie, not in Lincolnshire, usually in Lincolnshire, actually in Corfu at the moment, celebrating her 50th birthday, and very wisely listening to the programme as well. Kevin's in Basingstoke and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Kevin, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Yeah, hi Peter. Can I just want to respond to something you read out? The Rwanda policy, that wouldn't have worked. It was running for 2 years. It cost £700,000 and only 4 volunteers went there. And also the asylum seeker thing. Asylum seekers can only claim asylum in one European country. And if they try to claim asylum in another European country, if they failed, they can be checked on the EU database. Because we left the EU, we can't check. So if they've claimed asylum in an EU country, we can't check see if they've failed an asylum application before.
Okay.
So we have to start all over again. And also, the opinion polls. I mean, Nigel, Reform UK have been going down in opinion polls for about 7 months, I think, which I think is a good thing. I think he's in trouble, isn't he? I mean, if he's going to win on Thursday, and then the parliamentary investigations are going to continue, and then, you know, if he's found guilty, which, I mean, lots of people...
It's not about being found guilty, it's not a criminal matter, parliamentary... Hold on. Parliamentary Standards Watchdog may find against him, you're correct, yeah.
Yeah, and then if 10% of people want an election, it could have to go through the whole thing again. There are actually criminal investigations going on at the moment as well, with him and Richard Tice.
Okay, they're not criminal investigations. They're not criminal investigations.
What are they then?
They're not criminal. They're parliamentary standards investigations.
No, not those ones. The ones of fraud.
There is not a criminal investigation into Nigel Farage. There is not a criminal investigation into Richard Tice. That is not happening.
Are you sure about that?
Yes, I am.
What? So the money laundering allegations, taking money from people not knowing where it's come from.
No, that's not a criminal investigation into Nigel Farage. That is not a criminal investigation. You're wrong on that.
I thought that there was an investigation that George Cottrell's mum was paid.
That's not a criminal. That is not a criminal investigation into Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage is not a suspect in a criminal investigation.
Reform UK. It's Reform UK.
Okay, it is not. You said a moment ago that Nigel Farage was under criminal investigation. He is not, and we need to be really legally. Okay, Kevin, you need to let me speak. We need to be really legally careful about that, and I want to be absolutely clear that neither Nigel Farage nor Richard Tice is under any form of criminal investigation. Okay, I want to keep us both out of court. Okay.
Right, so it's the party then that's been investigated.
Let's move on from that topic. What would you like to say?
Okay. So, and also, I mean, Nigel Farage is very, very unpopular. And if there was, when the election does come round, I think there'll be a lot of tactical voting.
Okay, I mean, he is. The interesting thing with Nigel Farage is that he's very popular with some people, he's very unpopular with others. He's someone who elicits quite a number of very strong opinions, doesn't he?
Yeah, but the thing is, he's popular with about 25% of the population, and unpopular with, 75%, if my maths is right. So.
Well, it depends, certainly. Kevin, listen, thanks for your points. I really appreciate them. That's Kevin in Basingstoke. And yes, Kevin is absolutely right to say that police are investigating payments to Reform UK. Scotland Yard looking at two £250,000 donations to the party by Britain Means Business before the 2024 election. But I'm happy to clarify that neither Nigel Farage nor Richard Tice personally are under any form of police investigation. If you want to see a full list of those standing in Clacton, you can head to whocanivotefor.co.uk. Thank you to the texter who says all this crud on polls and Reform slipping down like they're disappearing is utter nonsense. It's not as if they're disappearing. They're just in third in 2 polls. That's what we're talking about. They've been ahead in every poll, over 300 polls for a long time. So it's a perfectly legitimate thing to talk about. The texter continues, Reform will win the next election, and the worse the migrant crisis goes between now and then will make it even more of a certainty. Listening to Tory commentators' take on this is laughable. I think, Kevin, voting for the Conservatives is probably unlikely. Lots more to discuss, including the dinghy with 230 people on it. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, the Telegraph has just published an article about a lifeboat service in France, warning of more to come after 230 asylum seekers crossed the channel on one vessel. This is France's lifeboat service has warned there is no limit to the number of migrants people smugglers will put on a boat to Britain. The French National Sea Rescue Service, which is SNSM, equivalent to the RNLI, warned it was seeing more and more large boats ferrying hundreds of migrants across the Channel. It was this morning that a record 230 asylum seekers arrived in Britain after travelling on a single 15-metre long vessel from Normandy, 49-foot vessel from Normandy. It was intercepted by Border Force, His Majesty's Coast Guard and the RNLI. It surpassed the previous record of 165 migrants who reached the UK in a single boat. That was just last month. The director, Jean-Marc Lemblin, of SNSM's Berck-sur-Mer branch, said over the past 3 months we've been seeing more and more 15-metre boats passing through. We didn't think there could be any more. He's talking about the 150 migrants. But really, there is no limit now. Many of the mega dinghies used for channel crossings are manufactured in China. They're shipped via commercial routes through countries such as Turkey and Bulgaria to European staging posts, chiefly Germany. For more on this, the international security and borders expert Henry Bolton is with me. Henry, what do you make of these comments from the French?
I think they're very realistic. There is no limit as long as the migrants want to reach the United Kingdom. Organised criminals will try to exploit that demand and try to supply that demand with what it wants, which is that transportation, and they will go to any lengths to do it. There's not a shortage of money. If you think that some of these people on that boat, or that, you can't really call it a dinghy, I don't know what you can call it at that scale.
It's not a small boat anyway, it's a big boat.
It's a very big boat. And that's you can see from that photo that you're showing now that it's clearly an unsafe operation. But these people could be paying anything from 1,100 euros to 4,500 euros. It's probably a variety of prices that they're paying, depending on where they've gone onto the beach. It's highly organised. These large boats are moving from a different jurisdiction in France. It's a different sort of gendarmerie, different policing jurisdiction, like we have different police forces. The French have their police regions as well. So these boats, these larger boats, are now evading slightly more stringent law enforcement further up around Calais. They're being launched from further south. This boat, it seems, came from the Dieppe area, travelled all the way up the French coast, picking up people as it came. Now, at every point, that's not going to be one organised crime group that is organising that. There's going to be it's going to be a large network of organised criminals, all of whom are making their profit out of it. So the French are right. And this is, as long as people want to come to the United Kingdom, there is going to be a demand for them for the organised criminal facilitation of that movement, and they are going to continue to meet it. I don't see how physically they can upscale any longer, but you're seeing bigger and bigger boats because they're reducing the number of boats because they can't go from so easily now from the Calais area because the French are doing more. So ultimately, the only way to address this, the only way, we can talk about jail sentences and new legislation and all the rest of it, but as long as the United Kingdom is an attractive destination for these people, they will continue to want to come, and the organised criminals will continue to try and facilitate that movement and make money out of it. So this is on us. This is not on the French. This is on us. Because we are making the United Kingdom an attractive place. Now,
Andy Burnham says he's going to be relentless in dealing with it. We heard from Keir Starmer said he was going to smash the gangs. We heard from Rishi Sunak saying he was going to stop the boats. None of that has happened.
No, and it's not happened because unless you're going to go after the gangs in a military-style operation, literally go out there and treat them as though they are terrorists that you're hunting down with special forces, and you are not going to break the criminal the sort of model, if you like, the business model of the criminals. The business model is dependent, and it only exists because there is a demand for it. And that demand will continue to be met. It doesn't matter what else happens, they will continue to try to meet that demand. The only way to switch this off, the only way, is to stop making the United Kingdom an attractive destination. And I'd add to this because we're seeing at the moment a bit of an increase. It's ebbs and flows, the movement across the Mediterranean. There's always a lag, if you like, a time lag of what then happens on the North French coast, because a proportion of if you get an increase across the Mediterranean, then a few months later, 2-3 months later, that starts to impact on the North.
So how do we do what you've suggested there, Henry? How do we make the UK how do we have a deterrent? How do we make it a less attractive place for migrants to come to? Because that's fundamental change, isn't it? That's not about necessarily just stopping the boats, although that might be the net result. We're talking about fundamental change, aren't we?
Yeah, we remove any option, any and every option for them to remain in the United Kingdom. So
should we not accept any asylum seekers?
No, I'm not saying that. These are not asylum seekers. These are economic migrants. If you've got people, I mean, I'll give you a perfect example of a real refugee who we should be giving refuge to, are the Belgians. I know it's a long time ago, but it's a perfect example. Because the Belgians, when they were invaded by the Germans in World War I, 64,000 of them came to my local town in Folkestone, came over in fishing boats, because they were absolutely fleeing an invading army. These people are not fleeing an invading army. There is no war in France. There's no war in Germany or across Europe. Look, Peter, we've been over this many times. We all know that the European Union is a place where these people are not going to be shot. They're not going to be blown up. They're not going to be tortured. They're not going to be incarcerated because they're gay, whatever it might be. That's not happening in Europe. These people are safe in Europe. The only reason they make the journey or want to make the journey from mainland Europe to the United Kingdom is because they want to, not because anybody is coercing them or anybody is forcing them to. And they want to because the conditions here are better. We give them more, we give them free dental care, we give them free health care, we give them taxis to go to visit the dentist, or the dentist even goes to visit them. God, I can't even get registered with an NHS dentist. So we're giving them all these things, and then we are, despite certain very limited and ineffective measures by the government to clamp down on employment of these people, we are basically we're allowing them to work on the black economy. And they are doing so, and we give them effectively the route. There's 198,000 people in the United Kingdom who have been turned down for asylum, or are here because they've exceeded visa time here and so on, who should not be here. They are not legally here, and we've done just about nothing.
And it is that classic thing of not a single bit of the system actually working as it should.
So that's the attractiveness.
Yeah.
That's what we've got to remove. And to finally, I know you've got stumped for time, but the only way to deal with this is to, I think, securely detain every single one of them, man, woman and child, until such time as we can remove them or they ask to go back to where they came from. I think that's the only deterrent that will work.
Henry, thank you. That's Henry Bolton there, international security and borders expert. What do you think of what he said? 0344 499 1000. Plenty of people getting in touch. So why are the French allowing all these people to be illegally living in their country, says one texter. Another says, I would question if the migrants actually pay money at all. They can just turn up on a beach with a boat and sail off to England. So if they're paying to do it, then they're wasting their money. Leslie says the El Salvador prison would be a great deterrent. The illegals would soon stop. She also says, if you're called to do jury service and a guilty verdict would mean a death sentence for the accused, would you vote guilty, says Leslie. The answer to that is no, Leslie. Ernie says, the way our veterans have been treated over the years is disgraceful. If we ever have to defend this country, the government would have to create a press gang, because everyone I know have said they wouldn't fight for this country, and they would have to be dragged screaming and shouting, and then they would refuse to fight. I remember a time when young boys lied about their age to fight for this country. That wouldn't happen now. Testy on Tyneside says, Kevin in Basingstoke says asylum seekers can only claim once. If they claim in another country, they can't claim here. Peter, can you let poor Kevin know that if you chuck your documents in the channel on the way over and you assume a new identity, there's no evidence you've ever claimed anywhere? Is there a factory where these people are made? Was Starmer the MKI model? I despair these people have the vote. Well, their vote is worth exactly the same as yours and mine, Testy. David in Canterbury says, please can you explain to us why many of these people who hate Farage insist on calling him Farage? I'm sure another caller just did that, says David. Do you know what? I once asked Nigel Farage about this, and I said, is it Farage or Farage? And he said, it's the difference between how people say garage or garage. He doesn't mind, and he said it's just a matter of how you pronounce it. So, David, you may be exercised about it. I'm not sure, Nigel. Farage is either. Paul in Northern Ireland says, does Kevin know anything? 700,000 quid for Rwanda. 4 people also mispronounces Nigel Farage's name. Enjoying the show, says Paul in Northern Ireland. Well, thank you for that, Paul. We'll go to the phones in just a second. Lots of people getting in touch about all sorts of issues, including the immigration issue, the veteran story, whatever you want to say between now and 10 o'clock. We'll chat to Pedri Hoskin as well about what's coming up on her programme. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
My father was born here, my mother was born here, I was born here, I consider myself British. People with exactly the same credentials, but maybe their family came from the Caribbean or came from India, but they have lived here 2 or 3 generations. They shared language, values, beliefs, integrated, assimilated generations ago. Why is they having babies? Why is that a threat to this country?
So, Julia, you are here acting as a mouthpiece for the regime that currently governs this country.
Do shut up, Charlie. You're embarrassing yourself.
What you're saying is exactly the same thing I've been hearing from my...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks everybody who's been in touch. Just had a quick look at some tweets as well. Thank you to Steve Potter, who says, I don't think any overpayments from government should be repaid. It's a fault of the government and civil service. They should answer for mistakes and errors. Mal says, your guest on a minute ago said politicians shouldn't overrule judges. The judge is missing the point. Let's speak to Rachel in Nottingham on the veterans story. You're very welcome to the programme, Rachel. What would you like to say?
Oh, hi. I've been listening a lot all day. I think I've spoken to you before, and I love your talk about hypotheticals, because that's the only thing we can talk about now is hypothetically, not reality. And, you know, talking about servicemen and women, of course, I've got to mention that before I get called out. But these people that have served this country, you know, put their lives in danger,
yes,
made enormous sacrifices for us. But we have veterans who are ending up homeless, struggling, to get the support they desperately need. And I think I just say out there, you know, honestly ask, what message does this send to a young person considering the armed forces? We ask them to serve and potentially put their lives on the line, but we give them no responsibility to then make sure that we look after them when they come home. We never look after them. You know, I'm not saying migrants are responsible for these problems. I'm not saying... Do you know what? I am actually saying the government has finite resources and has the responsibility to make sure the people who have served this country are not forgotten.
But listen, I agree with every single word you've said, Rachel, but the problem, I suppose, is not finite resources. It's not a matter of not having the money. It's overpaying and then asking for it back. It's saying that these... you know, the system isn't working because, well, maybe that is finite resources. They're not paying for people properly to administer the system correctly.
And, you know, on the back of that, we could say, you know, yeah, well, I do believe we should have controlled borders. I also believe people fleeing war, persecution deserve compassion and the proper process. those things can both be true. But I think we need to start talking about people who are already here too, families struggling to find homes, people wanting treatment, elderly people who can't get the support they need, but particularly our veterans and servicemen and women who are. Yet I think it won't be long until Poppy Day is wiped out. It really.
I don't think we're there yet. Do you?
No, we're not. But this is my, I'm a middle-aged woman, and I'm looking and thinking, oh my God, that whole kind of line, plant a seed for a tree. I think if we don't do something about looking, if we can't see right now without our willful blindness to see what we're doing to the soldiers, men and women, I've got to say that.
You don't have to. If you say soldiers, I think both men and women. But the point, Rachel, you make is a really good one. I mean, you look at America, it's absolutely not perfect and there are many, many problems. But they have a whole Veterans Administration. They have a huge government department. They have a cabinet-level secretary just for veterans. Now, we have a minister for veterans, but we don't have nearly the resources they have because they have people who are still dealing with PTSD from Afghanistan, from the wars in Korea, the Korean War, for example. There are many ways that we could help our veterans far more than we do. And it worries me that a basic calculation of how much is your pension worth, how much should you get, and are you getting that or are you not? Oh, actually, we got it wrong. Terribly sorry about that. By the way, you've got to pay us back 130 grand. I mean, that's shameful.
It is shameful. And I think the first thing we need to do for them is housing first. Housing first. Make sure veterans at risk of homelessness can access emergency accommodation, longer-term housing, mental health, addiction support. Let's see what's happening to them. No one wants to look at it. Again, it's willful blindness. Employment, retraining. They don't all have to go and be a security guard. And let's face it, security guard jobs have been taken. Sorry, I know that might make me sound a better transition from military to civilian.
Do you know what? I think, I mean, Andy Burnham's talked about rough sleeping and said he's going to sort it out and eradicate it. That would be a really good thing if he manages to do it. He didn't manage it in Manchester. Your point is really good, Rachel.
Do you really think he's got even a care about that?
I think he wants to change it. I just wonder whether he will or not. But the point you make, I mean, there's so many points you make that are really good, Rachel. The point, I suppose, that I would pick up on most when it comes to veterans is, it should be a real source of pride, and it is for many people, but we should, people shouldn't be sniffy about the armed services. We should do what America does. If people proudly go into restaurants wearing their uniform, they are given loads of discounts for being in uniform. We should say thank you for that. We should allow those people many privileges. We should give them discounts.
That isn't happening now, Patrick.
Well, it isn't.
That isn't happening.
Yeah.
And it hasn't happened for a long time. And I think I'm hoping that people wake up, if there's a stronger safety net for the vulnerable veterans.
Yeah, and with employment as well.
There's a stronger safety net for everybody. And if everybody really takes a moment to go, right, who's been protecting us? These are young men, old men, whoever we're talking about right now. I just think, just have some respect and recognise that we've been looked after.
Exactly. Rachel.
And if we don't look after them, sorry, I know I'm
No,
going
not at all. All I wanted to say was...
My message would be for everybody, just a stronger safety net for the vulnerable veterans.
Yeah, really good points, Rachel. I've just got to move on to other callers, but fantastic call. Really a huge amount of common sense in that call from Rachel in Nottingham. Let's go to Maz in Swansea. Maz, you're very welcome to the programme. I think this may be the first time we've spoken. What would you like to say this evening?
Yeah. Greetings, Peter.
Hi there.
It's about immigration and benefits. Now,
okay.
I don't want to go into specifics because I don't want to identify myself or other members of the family. But I have immigrant family members over generations.
Yeah.
And not everyone who left their home country came to Britain. Now, in the 1960s, a small number went to a particular area, and the benefits system was totally different.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't get official state benefits on long term. They got a one-off settlement grant. So once they got, and they were expected to go to work.
Yeah, so they got the grant and said,
day one.
That's it.
Now, the way this grant was calculated was based on the immigrant, are they an individual or a family?
Mm-hmm.
So if you were a family, you know, how many children?
Yeah, I think you get a bit more. So do you think, Maz, that something similar should happen now? You should be said, right, we've assessed you. We think this is the amount of money you need as a starter. Here you are. Off you go. Whatever's next, up to you.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Now, the system not only was based on the immigrant, but average earnings for the post. So, you know, in the case of my ancestors, family of 3, father, mother, 1 adult child.
Yes.
So father, medical field.
Right.
What would a medic in that area earn on the average year?
Okay, given the skills that person had.
Yep.
Okay, interesting.
Add 10%.
Yeah.
Because, you know, they have other expenses.
Set up costs and all the rest of it. Yeah, I get that.
Same thing. Mother, what did mother do? Housewife, but had previous administrative experience at level whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So based on, you know, a small payment for family maintenance plus a top-up for administrative experience.
So do you think that system should be brought back then, Maz?
Absolutely. It's very simple because they get a one-off payment and they have to work because once that money's gone, they don't get long-term benefits.
Okay. Really interesting to talk to you, Maz. Thank you. That's Maz in Swansea there. Robin says, I understand, but may be wrong. The EU states can push back migrants entering their country from other EU countries back to the previous EU country who rejected them. Then why are failed asylum seekers and refugees not eventually ejected backwards through EU states rather than being allowed to journey throughout Europe and then cross over to the UK? Quite a long message from Gary, who says the drop in the number of migrants crossing the Channel this year is most likely just a statistical anomaly, not as a result of progress in smashing the gangs. And here's why. The Met Office is constantly assessing the weather conditions in the Channel and rates each day according to the favourability for migrant crossings. Red being calm days when crossings are highly likely, with amber and green assigned to days when crossings would either be riskier or downright dangerous. Now, if you look at the first 4 months of 2025, there were 60 red days, which is almost 2.5 times the average for the same period in the previous 3 years. That's why in 2025 we saw exceptional numbers of migrants crossing the Channel in the first half of the year. Now, unless there were that same exceptional number of red days in the first 4 months of this year, it's pretty obvious that any comparison of the number of migrants crossing to date in 2026 with the number crossing for the same period in 2025 is going to appear favourable and look like progress, but most likely it isn't. It's most likely just the weather, says Gary. Well, thank you for that. Leslie says, you've just replied to my text regarding the death penalty. I think murderers would walk free. Jailing them is better. You're absolutely right to jail murderers. Well up for that. And if I wasn't a jury and jailing for life and I believe the person to be guilty, I'd have absolutely no hesitation. Something I'm against is the death penalty. That is not a view that is universally shared by our viewers and listeners, but that's okay because we disagree without being disagreeable. Let's go, before we speak to Petri Hoskin, to Mark in Bedfordshire. Mark, you're on the air. What would you like to say?
Hello, Peter.
Hi there.
I'll be brief.
You take your time. You take your time. No, I'll tell you. No massive rush. Go on ahead.
Okay. Reform, or Nigel Farage has announced, you know, he believes that the crossings should be a national emergency and wants to involve the military, specifically the Navy, on the Channel.
Yes.
Now, you have to bear with me on this one, Peter, because it sounds a little bit mad, but the wars that are being fought now seem to be based on drone technology. We have boats and we have aerial drones. Why can't it would be a lot cheaper if we did a deal with France and said, right, keep the money, your police force can actually keep your people safe in the towns where these illegal immigrants are causing problems, and we just want to have an incursion, say 10 to 20 feet onto land, and we could have the drones and they could just have darts.
So you have the drones and then the darts go, and the darts basically puncture the boats.
Yeah, you know, not.
I don't think that's crazy. I don't think that's out of the realms of possibility.
I mean, is that an insane suggestion?
I don't think it's totally. I mean, what we saw. Remember the French gendarme who cut the boat and then people had to get out of it when it was in the water. Far safer to have. And also, you don't have a physical person there, so they're not going to be targeted. To have a drone to do that, given what else we do with drones, I don't think that's completely bonkers at all, Mark.
I don't know why anyone hasn't considered it, because we don't even need the boats out there because they could be in a.
Well, you don't want people in the middle of the ocean and then they drown. You certainly don't want that.
Yeah. But it's boats to put them in the ocean and fly them from.
Yes.
But the people flying them from don't have to be on the boats.
Yes.
And just little darts, 10 foot in, or if they're just getting into the water. I don't know.
I don't think that's. I mean, given, I've heard some crazy solutions. I mean, I've heard people saying, that we need to start, have Gatling guns and shoot people. Like, I absolutely do not think that should ever happen. It would be totally wrong to happen. Your solution, I don't think. It's not the maddest solution I've heard, Mark.
It's humane, isn't it?
It's humane as well. Yeah. Listen, I don't think that's out of the realms of possibility. Thank you for your suggestion. That's Mark in Bedfordshire there. Appreciate that. Thanks also to Alison in County Antrim, who says, thanks for yet another great programme this evening to you and your team. Alison, thank you. And I don't thank the team enough. The team behind the glass, of course, does a fantastic job. And I'm sort of the top half of the swan swimming along, and they're the kind of feet underneath doing all the actual work. Petri Hoskin is with me, and she's here on the other side of the news. Hello there. Hi.
Hello, did you have a good weekend?
Lovely, thank you. Yes.
Excellent.
What about you?
Yeah, very nice. Thank you.
Yeah, nice weather.
It was a bit peoply at the beginning of the weekend, but then it wasn't so peoply at the end. So
okay. I was in Norfolk, actually.
Were you? Oh, very nice.
Yeah, it was very nice. Nice and sunny.
Yeah, lovely. I spent the whole time in my garden, so that was lovely. Right, coming up, we're going to be talking about the latest from the Middle East, because it's a very confusing picture at the moment with the Houthis now attacking Yemen and what that means for Donald Trump, and Donald Trump appearing to want to give in to Iran, but Iran are using that against Donald Trump and say, right, well, if you do want this all to go away, it's going to cost you. So we'll be looking into that as well, and looking at Benjamin Netanyahu rejecting the US's President Trump's Board of Peace deal on Gaza. We're also going to be looking at prisons and the overcrowding, and just really examining if any of Farage's ideas could actually work in the real world. So we'll be looking into that. And looking at subscription traps. Have you been caught with subscriptions?
Oh, all the time. I see things coming out, I just think, hold on a second, and you think you're signing up, and then you think you'll remember to sign out of it or to stop the subscription.
Or you don't think you're signing up. You think you're going for a 30-day free trial, so you sign up for that, and then suddenly you're being charged 35 quid a month.